You are asleep in your cottage. The roof above you is made of uneven thatch, and the wind sighs through its gaps, brushing your cheek with a faint chill. It's October, or maybe November. There is no calendar on the wall, and time drifts softly like the smoke from your dying fire. Your feet are cold, your fingers ache. The air smells of damp straw and something darker, mold maybe, or memory. Outside, someone's dog is barking, but then it stops, too quickly. You turn in your bed, just once, and fall still again. You are not awake. Not yet, but someone else is. Your neighbor, perhaps. The one with the missing teeth and the twitch in her eye. Or maybe the baker's boy, who once said you looked at him oddly. Or the priest, who mentioned in his sermon that Satan moves in quiet ways, especially among those who live alone. They've noticed things, that you never remarried, that you grow herbs in a tidy garden, that your cat is black, that your face is too pale, or your eyes are too sharp, or your bread rises better than theirs. And now, in the still dark before dawn, something has turned in their minds. A whisper, perhaps, a suspicion, a memory that wasn't real, but felt like it was. The kind of thought that grows when people are cold, afraid, and hungry. In the morning, there may be a knock, or maybe just the sound of footsteps, crunching frost outside your door. You won't know who told them. You won't know what they think you did. You won't even know what you're being accused of. But once they've spoken your name, it doesn't matter. The trial has already begun. Because this is Europe, the year is somewhere between 1600 and 1650, and to be accused of witchcraft is to be guilty of it. There were no second chances, no real defenses. The world was built on certainty, not evidence, and fear was more powerful than truth. This is the world of the European witch trials, a time of whispers and wind, of trembling candles and sharpened needles, of iron keys and locked doors, of judges who prayed before they sentenced, of children who pointed fingers, and mothers who disappeared, of fires and ropes, and long silent marches to nowhere. Tonight, we will not rush through this story. We will not dramatize it. We will not seek thrill or suspense. We will walk slowly, thoughtfully, as if through an old village lane, wet with mud and lit only by the soft glow of a lantern. We will visit the cottages, the churches, the courtrooms, and the prisons. We will listen to the slow, tired voices of the accused, and we will see, not from a distance, but from within, what it meant to live in a world where one wrong glance, one bad dream, one jealous neighbor could lead to your end. And we will ask the question quietly, not once, but again and again, would you have survived? For now, let your mind rest. Let the candlelight dim, and come with me, if you will, into the slow-turning fog of 17th century Europe, where the air was thick with smoke and silence, and the fear of witches. The world of 1600s Europe was not one of logic, or comfort, or clarity. It was a place where the seasons ruled more than kings did, and where the silence of a neighbor could feel like a judgment. People lived close to the edge, of famine, of disease, of despair, and on that edge, the wind carried not just the scent of wood smoke, but the sharp, invisible breath of fear. Fear that something unseen was working against them. Fear that illness did not come from water or wound, but from curses. Fear that bad luck had a face, a name, and it might be yours. Superstition was not just a part of life, it was woven through everything. From the first light of morning to the prayers muttered at dusk, the devil was real. Heaven and hell were as tangible as stone and bread. And if your child died in the night, if your crops failed without warning, if your cow gave sour milk, someone, somewhere, was to blame. That blame often landed on the shoulders of the quiet, the different, the inconvenient. To understand the witch trials, we must first understand that this was not a time of monsters and fairy tales. It was a time of unbearable simplicity, where good things came from God, and bad things, surely, must come from someone else. Someone you could name, someone you could accuse, someone you could burn. And so we begin. You wake to a world that doesn't belong to you. The floor is cold, even through your worn socks. The grey light of morning leaks in through the wooden shutters, carrying the scent of smoke and soil. You hear the sound of a rooster from somewhere distant, not your own. The birds have already begun their work, pecking and chirping through the frost-hardened ground. Life continues, as it always does, but today feels different. You rise slowly, with bones that ache in the quiet way of age, or worry. You light a small fire, coaxing it to life with the practiced movements of someone who has done this 1,000 times. You do not rush. Nothing in your life ever moves quickly, and yet, outside, a movement, the distant creak of cartwheels, or footsteps, or maybe just your imagination. You tell yourself it's nothing, because it always is, but your heart still beats a little faster. There is a knock at the door, not loud, not hurried, just a knock, enough to remind you that you are never truly alone. Even when you wish to be, you open it, and they are there, 2 men from the town, one older, the other younger, both with faces carved by duty or by fear. They ask you to come with them. They do not shout, they do not threaten, they do not tell you why. You know, the walk to the village is long, though it has never felt so long before. Every stone on the path is familiar, every crack in the wall. The children do not play today. The doors are shut, curtains twitch, then disappear. Your presence is no longer yours. It is theirs now. The villagers, the watchers, the silent judges. When you reach the church hall, it is colder inside than it is outside. A place meant for worship has become a place for something else. A scribe sits at a table, scratching with his quill. The priest stands nearby, his eyes tired but firm. A chair is placed in the center of the room, not facing the priest, not facing the table, facing everyone. You are asked to sit. No one says the word witch, not yet, but it hangs in the air like the lingering scent of last night's fire, acrid, undeniable. They begin to ask you questions, softly at first, about your habits, your prayers, your visitors, your dreams. They ask if you have ever made something spoil, if someone has ever fallen ill after seeing you, if you've ever had a moment of anger that coincided with a neighbor's misfortune. They ask if you talk to animals, if you have ever heard whispers in the woods, if your cat seems to know when you are sad, and then the questions stop being questions. They say someone saw you walking late at night. They say a child had a dream. They say your herbs caused a miscarriage. They say someone's cow died the day after you touched its fence. They say too many things. You deny them, of course. You try to speak plainly, without fear though your voice shakes. But the more you speak, the more they listen not to your words, but to the gaps between them, to your pauses, your breath, your doubt. They ask again and again, and you begin to wonder, what if they're right? What if the years of loneliness, the strange sounds in your dreams, the moments of intuition, what if they were more than just coincidence? What if, unknowingly, you have done harm? What if the devil doesn't need your permission? This, more than the ropes or the pricking or the dungeons, is how they win. Not by proving that you are a witch, but by making you believe, even for a moment, that you might be. It is not the fire that breaks people. It is the silence before it. The days pass slowly, though you are no longer sure how many. You are not kept in a cell. Not yet, but you are not free. You are watched, followed. The villagers no longer meet your eyes. The children run the other way. The place you once called home is still there, but it has been hollowed out, like fruit left too long in the sun. You are no longer a person. You are a symbol, a warning, an open wound. The village doesn't want to see, but cannot ignore. Then the real questioning begins. They take you to a different room. There are no windows. The walls are stone. The only light comes from a single lantern hanging low, casting long shadows that seem to shift when you're not looking. A man you do not know enters. He does not smile. He does not offer his name. He sits and he waits. You sit too because you have no choice. He does not accuse you, not directly. Instead, he tells you stories of other women, other trials, other confessions. He speaks softly, as if he were sharing secrets. He says that most people confess, that it is easier, quicker, that they can go home sooner. You ask if they lived. He does not answer. You say you are innocent. He says innocence is a matter of perspective. Your stomach tightens. Your mouth is dry. You try to remember your prayers, but the words feel thin now, stretched and strained. You wish you could cry, but even that has left you. You are only breath and skin and fear. He shows you a list, names, some you know, some you don't. He asks if they were with you, if you danced under the full moon, if you kissed the devil's hand, if you flew through the air on a stormy night. You laugh, just once, a dry and bitter sound. It is the wrong thing to do. He writes something down. Later, you are alone again. You think of your mother, though she has been gone many years. You wonder what she would say. You remember how she used to wrap bread in cloth, how her fingers were always warm, even in winter. You wonder if she would have been accused too, if perhaps she was. And you never knew. The next time they question you, they ask different things about marks on your body, about dreams, about hunger, about the feeling that someone is watching you, about guilt. You realize they are not looking for facts. They are looking for patterns, for anything they can shape into meaning. And meaning, in this place, is always dangerous. Eventually, you stop answering, not out of defiance, but out of fatigue. The questions blur, the days blur, the world narrows to a single point, survival. And still, you are not sure if you will. This is only the beginning, the quiet hours before the storm, the candlelight before the flame devours the wick. But for now, you are still here, still breathing, still hoping, in some small way, that someone will believe you, that someone will remember you not as a witch, but as a woman, just a woman. And this perhaps is the saddest truth of all, that to be just a woman in 1600s Europe was already dangerous enough. You are asleep in your cottage. The roof above you is made of uneven thatch, and the wind sighs through its gaps, brushing your cheek with a faint chill. It's October, or maybe November. There is no calendar on the wall, and time drifts softly, like the smoke from your dying fire. Your feet are cold, your fingers ache. The air smells of damp straw, and something darker, mold, maybe, or memory. Outside, someone's dog is barking, but then it stops, too quickly. You turn in your bed just once, and fall still again. You are not awake, not yet, but someone else is. Your neighbor, perhaps, the one with the missing teeth and the twitch in her eye. Or maybe the baker's boy, who once said you looked at him oddly. Or the priest, who mentioned in his sermon that Satan moves in quiet ways, especially among those who live alone. They've noticed things, that you never remarry, that you grow herbs in a tidy garden, that your cat is black, that your face is too pale, or your eyes are too sharp, or your bread rises better than theirs. And now, in the still dark before dawn, something has turned in their minds, a whisper, perhaps, a suspicion, a memory that wasn't real, but felt like it was. The kind of thought that grows when people are cold, afraid, and hungry. In the morning, there may be a knock, or maybe just the sound of footsteps crunching frost outside your door. You won't know who told them. You won't know what they think you did. You won't even know what you're being accused of. But once they've spoken your name, it doesn't matter. The trial has already begun. Because this is Europe. The year is somewhere between 1600 and 1650, and to be accused of witchcraft is to be guilty of it. There were no second chances, no real defenses. The world was built on certainty, not evidence, and fear was more powerful than truth. This is the world of the European witch trials, a time of whispers and wind, of trembling candles and sharpened needles, of iron keys and locked doors, of judges who prayed before they sentenced, of children who pointed fingers and mothers who disappeared, of fires and ropes, and long, silent marches to nowhere. Tonight, we will not rush through this story. We will not dramatize it. We will not seek thrill or suspense. We will walk, slowly, thoughtfully, as if through an old village lane, wet with mud and lit only by the soft glow of a lantern. We will visit the cottages, the churches, the courtrooms, and the prisons. We will listen to the slow, tired voices of the accused, and we will see, not from a distance, but from within, what it meant to live in a world where one wrong glance, one bad dream, one jealous neighbor could lead to your end. And we will ask the question quietly, not once, but again and again, would you have survived? For now, let your mind rest. Let the candlelight dim, and come with me, if you will, into the slow-turning fog of 17th century Europe, where the air was thick with smoke and silence, and the fear of witches. The world of 1600s Europe was not one of logic or comfort or clarity. It was a place where the seasons ruled more than kings did, and where the silence of a neighbor could feel like a judgment. People lived close to the edge of famine, of disease, of despair. And on that edge, the wind carried not just the scent of wood smoke, but the sharp, invisible breath of fear. Fear that something unseen was working against them. Fear that illness did not come from water or wound, but from curses. Fear that bad luck had a face, a name, and it might be yours. Superstition was not just a part of life. It was woven through everything. From the first light of morning to the prayers muttered at dusk, the devil was real. Heaven and hell were as tangible as stone and bread. And if your child died in the night, if your crops failed without warning, if your cow gave sour milk, someone, somewhere, was to blame. That blame often landed on the shoulders of the quiet, the different, the inconvenient. To understand the witch trials, we must first understand that this was not a time of monsters and fairy tales. It was a time of unbearable simplicity, where good things came from God, and bad things, surely, must come from someone else. Someone you could name, someone you could accuse, someone you could burn. And so we begin. You wake to a world that doesn't belong to you. The floor is cold, even through your worn socks. The grey light of morning leaks in through the wooden shutters, carrying the scent of smoke and soil. You hear the sound of a rooster from somewhere distant, not your own. The birds have already begun their work, pecking and chirping through the frost-hardened ground. Life continues, as it always does, but today feels different. You rise slowly, with bones that ache in the quiet way of age or worry. You light a small fire, coaxing it to life with the practiced movements of someone who has done this 1,000 times. You do not rush. Nothing in your life ever moves quickly, and yet, outside, a movement, a pause in the wind, the distant creak of cartwheels, or footsteps, or maybe just your imagination. You tell yourself it's nothing, because it always is, but your heart still beats a little faster. There is a knock at the door, not loud, not hurried, just a knock, enough to remind you that you are never truly alone, even when you wish to be. You open it, and they are there. Two men from the town, one older, the other younger, both with faces carved by duty or by fear. They ask you to come with them. They do not shout. They do not threaten. They do not tell you why. You know, the walk to the village is long, though it has never felt so long before. Every stone on the path is familiar, every crack in the wall. The children do not play today. The doors are shut, curtains twitch, then disappear. Your presence is no longer yours. It is theirs now, the watchers, the silent judges. When you reach the church hall, it is colder inside than it is outside. A place meant for worship has become a place for something else. A scribe sits at a table, scratching with his quill. The priest stands nearby, his eyes tired but firm. A chair is placed in the center of the room, not facing the priest, not facing the table, facing everyone. You are asked to sit. No one says the word witch, not yet, but it hangs in the air like the lingering scent of last night's fire, acrid, undeniable. They begin to ask you questions softly at first about your habits, your prayers, your visitors, your dreams. They ask if you have ever made something spoil, if someone has ever fallen ill after seeing you, if you've ever had a moment of anger that coincided with a neighbor's misfortune. They ask if you talk to animals, if you have ever heard whispers in the woods, if your cat seems to know when you are sad, and then the questions stop being questions. They say someone saw you walking late at night. They say a child had a dream. They say your herbs caused a miscarriage. They say someone's cow died the day after you touched its fence. They say too many things. You deny them, of course. You try to speak plainly, without fear, though your voice shakes. But the more you speak, the more they listen not to your words but to the gaps between them, to your pauses, your breath, your doubt. They ask again and again, and you begin to wonder, what if they're right? What if the years of loneliness, the strange sounds in your dreams, the moments of intuition, what if they were more than just coincidence? What if, unknowingly, you have done harm? What if the devil doesn't need your permission? This, more than the ropes or the pricking or the dungeons, is how they win, not by proving that you are a witch, but by making you believe, even for a moment, that you might be. It is not the fire that breaks people, it is the silence before it. The days pass slowly, though you are no longer sure how many. You are not kept in a cell, not yet, but you are not free. You are watched, followed. The villagers no longer meet your eyes. The children run the other way. The place you once called home is still there, but it has been hollowed out like fruit left too long in the sun. You are no longer a person. You are a symbol, a warning, an open wound the village doesn't want to see, but cannot ignore. Then the real questioning begins. They take you to a different room. There are no windows. The walls are stone. The only light comes from a single lantern hanging low, casting long shadows that seem to shift when you're not looking. A man you do not know enters. He does not smile. He does not offer his name. He sits and he waits. You sit too, because you have no choice. He does not accuse you, not directly. Instead, he tells you stories of other women, other trials, other confessions. He speaks softly, as if he were sharing secrets. He says that most people confess, that it is easier, quicker, that they can go home sooner. You ask if they lived. He does not answer. You say you are innocent. He says innocence is a matter of perspective. Your stomach tightens. Your mouth is dry. You try to remember your prayers, but the words feel thin now, stretched and strained. You wish you could cry, but even that has left you. You are only breath and skin and fear. He shows you a list. Names. Some you know, some you don't. He asks if they were with you. If you danced under the full moon, if you kissed the devil's hand, if you flew through the air on a stormy night. You laugh, just once, a dry and bitter sound. It is the wrong thing to do. He writes something down. Later, you are alone again. You think of your mother, though she has been gone many years. You wonder what she would say. You remember how she used to wrap bread in cloth, how her fingers were always warm, even in winter. You wonder if she would have been accused too, if perhaps she was, and you never knew. The next time they question you, they ask different things, about marks on your body, about dreams, about hunger, about the feeling that someone is watching you, about guilt. You realize they are not looking for facts. They are looking for patterns, for anything they can shape into meaning. And meaning in this place is always dangerous. Eventually, you stop answering, not out of defiance, but out of fatigue. The questions blur. The days blur. The world narrows to a single point. Survival. And still you are not sure if you will. This is only the beginning. The quiet hours before the storm. The candlelight before the flame devours the wick. But for now, you are still here. Still breathing. Still hoping in some small way that someone will believe you. That someone will remember you not as a witch, but as a woman. Just a woman. And this, perhaps, is the saddest truth of all, that to be just a woman in 1600s Europe was already dangerous enough. Chapter 1. Living in the 1600s, a harsh, suspicious time. To understand the fear that drove the witch trials of the 1600s, you must first understand the world in which those fears were born. This was not a time of comfort or convenience. It was a time when survival was uncertain, when every season brought new risks, and when most people lived their entire lives within a few miles of where they were born. Imagine waking up in a small, damp house made of wood and wattle, with a roof of straw that leaked during rain. The hearth is the center of the home, the only source of warmth, and even that warmth is fleeting, easily lost through the cracks in the walls. There is no glass on the windows, only wooden shutters which keep out the wind, but also the light. The air inside is heavy with smoke and the scent of yesterday's stew, a thin broth of root vegetables, maybe some barley, and if you're lucky, a bit of salted meat. There is no electricity, of course, no plumbing. The morning routine begins with hauling water from a well, often a shared one for the entire village. The water is cold and the bucket is heavy, and your hands are already raw from work. You don't eat breakfast as we know it, maybe a piece of dry bread, maybe nothing at all. Hunger is common, hunger is ordinary. Most people are peasants, working the land not for themselves, but for a lord or a landlord. You plant in spring, tend in summer, harvest in autumn, and pray during winter that your stores will last. There are no grocery stores, no guarantees. A single bad harvest, one storm, one infestation, one early frost, and your family might not make it through the winter. You live by the rhythm of the church bells. They ring for mass, for death, for marriage, and for mourning. Religion is not just a belief system, it is the scaffolding that holds your world together. The priest is not merely a man in robes, he is the voice of authority, the interpreter of suffering, the one who tells you why things happen the way they do. If your child dies, the priest tells you it was God's will. If your cow won't give milk, he says it may be punishment. And if strange things continue to happen, if sickness lingers, if milk curdles, if crops fail, he may say the devil is near. In this world, there is little room for difference. Those who do not marry are suspect. Those who live alone are watched. Women who speak too much are dangerous. Men who limp or stutter are marked. Any sign of deviation from health, from habit, from holiness can be seen as a sign of something darker. Superstition is not a fringe belief. It is embedded in daily life. You do not walk under certain trees. You do not leave your shoes upside down. You tie charms to your child's crib. You whisper prayers over every injury, every meal, every journey. Illness is not just a matter of germs, which you do not know exist. It is a matter of spirits, of curses, of divine judgment. You are taught from birth that the world is a battleground between good and evil, and that evil often hides in plain sight. It could be in your neighbor's house, in your own thoughts, in the withered woman who sells eggs by the road, in the girl who hums to herself while gathering herbs. The devil does not announce himself. He moves through people, often women, you are told, and especially those who seem too clever, too calm, or too content. The winters are brutal. The cold settles in your bones and stays for months. You burn peat or wood if you have it. Otherwise, you shiver. You wear the same clothes for weeks, and they never truly dry. Death is always near, from fever, from childbirth, from accident. You do not expect to live to old age. If you do, your body is bent, your hands stiff, your eyes dimmed by time and smoke. And so you grow up learning to fear. Not just the world, but the people in it. You learn to stay quiet, to nod when spoken to avoid looking too long at anyone. You learn that the safest way to live is to be invisible, and even then it may not be enough. In a world so harsh, so uncertain, people need someone to blame. When crops fail, they blame the woman with the herb garden. When children fall ill, they blame the old widow with the cloudy eyes. When luck turns bad, they blame the girl who never quite fit in. It doesn't take much, just a whisper, a glance, a rumor, because in this world, the line between the natural and the supernatural is thin, and the moment something goes wrong, the hunt for a cause begins. It is into this world that you are born, a world where your worth is measured by your obedience, where questions are dangerous, where survival is not just about food and shelter, but about silence and sameness and fear. A world where witch trials make sense, not because they are just, but because they are inevitable. This is not the world of fairy tales. It is the world of cold mornings, cracked hands and eyes that look away when you pass. And you live in it. You live in it, hoping no one ever says your name. Even your dreams are shaped by this life. You do not imagine castles or kingdoms, only warmth, a bowl of hot stew that fills the belly, a roof that doesn't leak, a winter that ends early. These are your luxuries, your distant hopes. There is no time to dream of adventure or greatness. There is only time to endure. The days are filled with labor. Every person, young and old, has a task. Children gather sticks for firewood. Mothers mend clothes, churn butter, tend to crying infants. Fathers dig, saw, plow. There are no weekends, no holidays, except for feast days marked by the church. And even those bring more prayer than rest. Suffering is expected. Joy is fleeting. Laughter is rare. And yet, despite it all, the village lives. It breathes in the slow rhythm of repetition. The market opens once a week. Bread is baked in clay ovens, bells toll, fields are tilled, animals are born, and animals are slaughtered. Life continues, not with celebration, but with resignation. You watch the sun to tell the time. You mark the seasons by the bloom of certain flowers, or the way the light shifts in the evenings. You know your neighbors well, not by choice, but by proximity. You know who argues, who drinks too much, who has too many children, who has none, and they know you just as well. No one is anonymous. No one can disappear. When someone falls ill, remedies are made with herbs, poultices, and prayer. If the illness lingers, suspicion starts. Not of medicine, there is none, but of hidden intentions. Why did the fever not break? Why did the rash spread? Why did the child not wake? It is easier to blame a person than accept the unknown. It is easier to believe in curses than in chance. Easier to say that someone wished harm than to face the randomness of suffering. Fear demands an answer, and the witch trials offered one. Witches, people believed, were real. They walked among you. They smiled and waved and helped with chores. And at night, they danced with demons, boiled potions, whispered hexes into the wind. They were not strangers from the woods. They were neighbors, friends, family. And this is what made it all so terrifying, because if anyone could be a witch, then no one was truly safe. Every kindness could be a trap, every gift a test, every coincidence a sign. It wasn't just about evil, it was about uncertainty, about restoring control in a world where control was an illusion. So the people watched, closely, obsessively, looking for patterns, for signs, for anything unusual. A woman who walked in the woods at dusk, a man who sang to himself in the fields, a child who dreamed strange dreams. Anyone who broke the quiet, predictable rhythm of village life became a question mark. And questions, in a world so fragile, were dangerous. Those accused often didn't understand why. A misunderstood joke, a spoiled batch of butter, a goat that wandered off. It could be anything. And once the whisper started, it rarely stopped. Because to defend someone was to cast suspicion on yourself, and silence once again became the only defense. Church sermons fed the fear. Priests spoke of temptation, of the devil's reach, of the importance of vigilance. They reminded people that even the holiest places could be breached, that evil wore familiar faces, that God watched, and so should you. Witch trials were not driven by evidence, but by emotion, a swelling of collective doubt, anger, jealousy, grief. They were less about law and more about release. The release of fear, of guilt, of helplessness. When a witch was found, punished, executed. The village exhaled. Order, however briefly, was restored, but peace never lasted, because fear does not disappear with a single name. It waits, it festers, it looks for another target, and so the cycle continued. This was life in the 1600s, not in the heart of cities, but in the outlying villages, the shadowed forests, the frost-bitten hills, places where stories outlived facts, where pain needed purpose, and where survival often meant staying invisible. To live here was to walk a narrow path, bordered by obedience on one side and silence on the other, and all it took was one stumble to fall into suspicion. This chapter of history is not about the supernatural. It's about people, ordinary, exhausted, frightened people, trying to make sense of a world they couldn't control, and in doing so, turning against their own. You wouldn't need to commit a crime. You wouldn't need to cast a spell. All you would need to do is be noticed. And even then, you might never know why. Even your dreams are shaped by this life. You do not imagine castles or kingdoms, only warmth, a bowl of hot stew that fills the belly, a roof that doesn't leak, a winter that ends early. These are your luxuries, your distant hopes. There is no time to dream of adventure or greatness. There is only time to endure. The days are filled with labor. Every person, young and old, has a task. Children gather sticks for firewood. Mothers mend clothes, churn butter, tend to crying infants. Fathers dig, saw, plow. There are no weekends, no holidays, except for feast days marked by the church, and even those bring more prayer than rest. Suffering is expected. Joy is fleeting. Laughter is rare. And yet, despite it all, the village lives. It breathes in the slow rhythm of repetition. The market opens once a week. Bread is baked in clay, ovens, bells toll, fields are tilled, animals are born, and animals are slaughtered. Life continues, not with celebration, but with resignation. You watch the sun to tell the time. You mark the seasons by the bloom of certain flowers, or the way the light shifts in the evenings. You know your neighbors well, not by choice, but by proximity. You know who argues, who drinks too much, who has too many children, who has none, and they know you just as well. No one is anonymous. No one can disappear. When someone falls ill, remedies are made with herbs, poultices, and prayer. If the illness lingers, suspicion starts. Not of medicine, there is none, but of hidden intentions. Why did the fever not break? Why did the rash spread? Why did the child not wake? It is easier to blame a person than accept the unknown. It is easier to believe in curses than in chance. Easier to say that someone wished harm than to face the randomness of suffering. Fear demands an answer, and the witch trials offered one. Witches, people believed, were real. They walked among you, they smiled and waved and helped with chores. And at night they danced with demons, boiled potions, whispered hexes into the wind. They were not strangers from the woods. They were neighbors, friends, family. And this is what made it all so terrifying. Because if anyone could be a witch, then no one was truly safe. Every kindness could be a trap, every gift a test, every coincidence a sign. It wasn't just about evil, it was about uncertainty, about restoring control in a world where control was an illusion, so the people watched closely, obsessively, looking for patterns, for signs, for anything unusual. A woman who walked in the woods at dusk, a man who sang to himself in the fields, a child who dreamed strange dreams. Anyone who broke the quiet, predictable rhythm of village life became a question mark, and questions, in a world so fragile, were dangerous. Those accused often didn't understand why. A misunderstood joke, a spoiled batch of butter, a goat that wandered off. It could be anything. And once the whisper started, it rarely stopped. Because to defend someone was to cast suspicion on yourself, and silence, once again, became the only defense. Church sermons fed the fear. Priests spoke of temptation, of the devil's reach. of the importance of vigilance. They reminded people that even the holiest places could be breached, that evil wore familiar faces, that God watched, and so should you. Witch trials were not driven by evidence, but by emotion, a swelling of collective doubt, anger, jealousy, grief. They were less about law and more about release, the release of fear, of guilt, of helplessness. When a witch was found, punished, executed, the village exhaled. Order, however briefly, was restored, but peace never lasted, because fear does not disappear with a single name. It waits, it festers, it looks for another target, and so the cycle continued. This was life in the 1600s, not in the heart of cities, but in the outlying villages, the shadowed forests, the frostbitten hills, places where stories outlived facts, where pain needed purpose, and where survival often meant staying invisible. To live here was to walk a narrow path, bordered by obedience on one side and silence on the other, and all it took was one stumble to fall into suspicion. This chapter of history is not about the supernatural. It's about people, ordinary, exhausted, frightened people, trying to make sense of a world they couldn't control, and in doing so, turning against their own. You wouldn't need to commit a crime. You wouldn't need to cast a spell. All you would need to do is be noticed, and even then, you might never know why. Chapter 2: Who got accused, and why you fit the profile. You do not need to be feared to be accused. You do not even need to be hated. In 1600s Europe, all you needed was to be noticed. The question of who became a target during the witch trials is not answered by evil deeds or strange powers. It is answered by proximity, by misfortune, by social tension, and by the persistent need to explain the unexplainable. The accused were not monsters. They were neighbors, and more often than not, they were women. There is no single type of person who became a scapegoat, but patterns emerge when you look closely. Women who were older, especially those who had outlived their husbands, were especially vulnerable. Widowhood meant independence, and independence was suspicious. Without a man to speak for them, these women lived in the margins, respected perhaps, but never entirely trusted. Childless women, too, were often watched with wary eyes. In a world where fertility was both a gift and a divine expectation, to be barren was to be marked. If a woman could not bring life into the world, then perhaps she had made a pact with forces that took life away. Midwives walked a fine line. They were necessary, called upon in times of great need, trusted to deliver babies and ease pain. But when things went wrong, when a child was stillborn, when a mother bled too long, it was easy to turn on them. Their knowledge, which set them apart, also made them dangerous. The very skills that saved lives could, with only a whisper, be reframed as tools of death. Young women were not spared either. If a girl was too pretty, she might be accused of seducing men with unnatural charms. If she was too plain, she might be jealous. If she laughed at the wrong time, or walked in the woods, or refused a suitor, she might be called a witch simply for being inconvenient. Men were accused too, though less often. The ones who lived alone, who avoided church, who spoke in riddles or read too much. Foreigners were easy targets. So were travelers, beggars, the sick, the mentally ill. Anyone who upset the delicate balance of the village, even unintentionally, could become the subject of suspicion, and suspicion, once seeded, was hard to uproot. Imagine this: a woman in her 50s, living at the edge of the village. She sells herbs, maybe some ointments. Her garden grows well, better than others. She talks to herself while she works. She doesn't attend church every week. She has no husband, no children. She has a cat, a crooked smile, and a story no one quite knows. Now imagine, a cow dies, a child gets sick, a storm ruins the wheat. You need a reason, something more than bad luck, something more than nature's cruelty, and she is right there. Familiar, but never quite understood, helpful, but strange. You say her name. The reasons come after. In many cases, the accused were already outsiders long before they were labeled witches. They didn't follow the same social patterns. They didn't conform to expectations. They were too loud, or too quiet, too clean, or too dirty, too generous, or too greedy. Contradiction itself could be dangerous. To stand out in any direction was to draw attention, and attention was the most dangerous thing of all. There were social conflicts too, land disputes, family rivalries, inheritance questions, a brother angry over a will, a neighbor upset about a fence. These tensions festered in silence until an accusation gave them a voice. Women who were outspoken were often accused of having sharp tongues. This was not just a metaphor. A woman who spoke out of turn, who contradicted a man, who questioned authority, was seen as unnatural. The idea that a woman could hold power, even if it was only the power of words, was threatening. Jealousy played its part. A woman with a better garden, a girl with clearer skin, a man whose cattle never sickened. Good fortune, in a world of hardship, often made enemies. And when bad luck struck, that good fortune could be painted as a sign of dark dealings. Even kindness could be twisted. A woman who offered help and was refused might be accused when misfortune followed. Her goodwill seen not as charity, but as a trap. She tried to give me something, they would say. I said no, and then my baby fell ill. The conclusion needed no logic. It only needed fear. The line between healer and witch was a thin one. Herbs that soothed pain could be said to cause it. A salve for headaches might be reimagined as a curse. Knowledge of the natural world passed down through generations became suspect the moment it failed to work, or the moment someone chose to say it did. And when one person spoke, others followed. Not because they believed, but because they feared being next. To doubt an accusation was to align yourself with the accused. Safer. Always. To nod, to agree, to add your own story. Yes, I saw her by the river, whispering. Yes, she once looked at my child, and he cried. Yes, my bread never rose after she visited. Each statement built the case, and the more people who spoke, the more solid the story became. Not because it was true, but because it was repeated. In truth, the reasons for accusation were rarely about the accused. They were about the accuser, about fear, about control, about making sense of a world that didn't make sense, about taking action when everything else felt helpless. To fit the profile of an accused witch was not about what you did, it was about what others needed you to be. And the most chilling truth is this: you don't know if you fit the profile until it is too late. You might think you're safe because you go to church, because you're kind, because you've done nothing wrong. But in 1600s Europe, innocence was not protection. Familiarity was not a shield. Goodness was not a defense. All it took was a single moment, a single misfortune, a single glance, remembered wrongly, and suddenly you were not a person. You were a problem, a threat, a question that needed to be answered, and there was only one answer. The village knew you were a witch. In towns where lives were so closely intertwined, even the smallest rift could lead to ruin. Accusations were not lightning bolts from the blue. They often followed long winters of resentment. The community was bound together by habit, proximity, and shared hardship. But that closeness did not always produce harmony. More often, it bred resentment. Quiet grudges ripened over time. If your cart broke because someone failed to warn you of a hole in the road, you might forgive them. If your child fell ill and never recovered, that wound stayed open. And when the opportunity came to point a finger, some took it eagerly. When the first accusation was made, it was never truly alone. Like wolves circling their prey, other voices joined in. A neighbor recalled a strange sound she once heard at night. Another remembered a time when her bread didn't rise after speaking to the accused. None of it made sense, but all of it felt real. Memory is a fragile thing, and in a fearful village, memory bends. The worst part was that once your name was spoken, It was no longer just about you. They began to look for others connected to you. Friends, family, those who might have visited your house or shared your meals or exchanged herbs and charms. The suspicion spread like wildfire, leaping from one person to the next. To know you was to risk being like you. Even children were questioned, especially children. Their words, unfiltered and imaginative, could become powerful tools in the hands of a desperate court. A frightened child might say something they thought was true, or something they overheard, or something they didn't fully understand, and the adults around them would nod solemnly, recording each statement as if it were divine truth. I saw her float. She rode a goat in the sky. She talked to a black dog. Such claims were not challenged. They were treasured. They were used. The image of a witch was already in the minds of the people. They knew what to look for because they had been told what to fear. Books, sermons, and whispers had painted the picture long ago. The witch was ugly, old, twisted, angry. She kept animals that were not quite right. She spoke when she should not. She made eye contact, or she avoided it. She walked too quickly or too slowly. She was always wrong. No matter what she did, this fantasy became a lens. Once you were accused, everything about you was viewed through it. You helped deliver a baby. You knew too much. You declined to lend your neighbor flour. You were cruel. You prayed alone. You were secretive. You wept too much. You felt guilty. You did not weep at all. You were cold. Every path led to the same place. Men who stood beside their wives or daughters were sometimes accused themselves. To defend a woman, marked as a witch, was to invite her fate. Some stood firm. Others withdrew. And some, with heavy hearts or colder ones, testified to save themselves. There are records of husbands who denounced their wives, of brothers who stood silent, of fathers who turned away. The trials did not just destroy individuals, they shattered families. And always, the records would say the same. The accused confessed, but a confession was not the truth. It was a survival strategy or a final surrender. Some confessed to end the questioning. Some confessed in hope of mercy. Some confessed because they no longer knew what was real. They were told the devil had touched them, had marked them, had entered their dreams. And after days without sleep, without food, without light or hope, they began to believe it. I must have done something, they said. I can't remember, but maybe I did. I want to stop this. Tell me what to say. And the scribes wrote it down. Once you were accused, your options were few. If you denied it, the questioning continued. The tests followed, the inspections, the trials. If you confessed, perhaps you could name others. Perhaps you could live, perhaps not. There were no rules, not really, just hope and fear, and the faint chance that you might be spared. And here lies the most haunting truth. No one was truly safe. Witchcraft was not about guilt. It was about proximity, suspicion, and timing. You could live your life in silence, in kindness, in service, and still be dragged to the center of the village one morning, your hands bound, your neighbors watching, because your child cried at the wrong time, because someone envied your roof, because your bread rose too high. You did not survive a witch trial because you were good. You survived because no one spoke your name, and even then, you might still be next. When night fell over the village, the fear did not sleep. Candles burned low behind shuttered windows, and families whispered prayers with eyes wide open. Every creak in the wood, every gust of wind became a question. The villagers were not cruel by nature. They were afraid, and fear, when left to fester, makes people do terrible things. Even those who never spoke an accusation aloud felt it in their bones, that tension, that readiness to believe the worst of others. Because to point the finger was to buy yourself another day of safety, and for many, that was enough. No one wanted to be a witch, but even more, no one wanted to be the next one accused. And so the silence grew heavier, and the village waited, and the firewood burned low, until the next name was spoken. Sometimes it wasn't even fear or anger that sparked an accusation. It was boredom, a simple desire to be involved in something larger than the monotony of daily life. In communities where days blurred together in repetition, even tragedy had a rhythm. To speak a name, to be the center of attention, to contribute to the story, these were temptations as strong as any spell. Children learned early who was safe to mimic and who was not. They watched how their parents looked at the widow who walked alone, or how they paused when the herbalist passed by. From the beginning, the lesson was clear. Do not be strange, do not be loud, do not be different. And yet, everyone was different in their own quiet way. You might sing to yourself when you think no one is listening. You might dream of places beyond the village. You might have thoughts you never speak aloud. These things in another time might be harmless. They might even be beautiful. But here, they are dangerous. To be human in the 1600s was to live in fear of being seen for what you really were. Not a witch, not a monster, just a person. Flawed, fragile, trying your best. But that was never what they wanted to see. They wanted certainty, simplicity, an enemy they could name, and in their hunger for answers, they turned toward their own. In the end, that's what makes these trials so haunting. Not that they happened, but that they made sense to the people who lived them. That fear could be dressed as righteousness. That silence could be mistaken for guilt. That pain could feel like justice. And so it was that entire communities turned inward, searching for rot that did not exist, and finding it anyway, because when the world felt broken, it was easier to break someone else than admit you could not fix it. And that is why anyone could be accused, even you. Chapter 3. The Spark. How a trial began. It did not start with fire. It never did. Witch trials often began in whispers, not in screams. Before the confessions, before the judges, before the executions, there was a moment, subtle, quiet, almost invisible, where fear took root. And that moment, more than any spell or curse, was the spark. Imagine it. A small village nestled in the folds of a forest. A community of a few dozen families, their lives woven together like threads in a frayed tapestry. The days pass in familiar repetition. Plant, harvest, mend, pray. Most things go unnoticed. A sick cow here, a spoiled jar of butter there, a child with a fever. Life is uncertain, but no one asks too many questions. Until one day, someone does. Maybe a woman falls ill and does not recover. Maybe she screams in her sleep, clawing at something only she can see. Maybe she speaks in tongues, or falls into fits, or simply dies with her eyes open and a look of terror frozen on her face. The priest is called, of course. Prayers are said. Holy water is sprinkled, but the fear does not leave. And someone remembers she had an argument with her neighbor last week. The neighbor who lives alone. The one who walks the edge of the woods. The one who does not kneel often enough at church. That's when the first seed is planted. It could also begin with livestock, a horse refusing to eat, a goat that stumbles, its eyes pale and strange, a dog that howls every night without cause. The animals know, they say. They sense what humans cannot, and if they fear something, maybe you should too. These are small things, easy to overlook, but fear has a way of gathering mass as it rolls downhill. One thought leads to another, then another. People begin to share stories. Memories are reshaped. I saw her in the woods, someone says. She didn't look right. My fire went out just after she passed by, says another. I heard her muttering to herself. A third adds, the spark catches. It isn't long before the priest begins to speak more pointedly. His sermons turn darker. He warns of temptation, of hidden enemies, of the devil's servants walking among the faithful. Not by name, not yet, but everyone hears what isn't said. Then the misfortunes multiply. A child is born sickly. A cart breaks. Rain doesn't come. Or worse, it comes too much, flooding the barley fields and soaking the wheat. All natural, perhaps. But in the heart of a people already burdened by hunger and grief, these are not coincidences, they are signs. The village elders meet, not formally, just a few men standing outside the church, speaking in low tones. They do not accuse, they consider, they wonder aloud. They let the question hang in the air. Like smoke, is something unnatural at work? The answer, unspoken, is yes, and that is when the name is said aloud. Not in anger, not in certainty, but in doubt. What about her? One man says, she knows things, she's always watching. She spoke to a crow once. She predicted the frost. It only takes one name. The next day, a question is asked. The woman, or sometimes a man, is approached, not arrested, not yet, just spoken to. A simple conversation. At first, questions about her health, her prayers, her neighbors. She is told there is concern. She is told to be careful. She is reminded of God's watchful eye. She goes home shaken. She tells no one, or maybe she does, but it is too late. The attention has found her. The air around her shifts. People stop meeting her gaze. Children run from her doorway. The baker refuses her coin. Soon, someone else steps forward. They say she gave them a look, just the day before their baby fell ill. They say her herbs didn't work. They say she smells of smoke and something bitter. They say her cat is never far from her heels. And now the spark becomes a flame. The priest is no longer cautious. He names the sin from the pulpit. He speaks of witches, of evil, of the need for vigilance. He does not name her, but his eyes search the crowd, and everyone knows. The elders visit again. This time they bring others, not just the priest, maybe a magistrate, maybe a scribe. They come not with chains, but with questions. They tell her a complaint has been made, that it is probably nothing. But they only wish to be sure. They ask her about her habits, her dreams, her thoughts, her soul. She tries to answer clearly. She is confused, but she is not afraid, not yet. Then they ask her to come with them, not far, just to the church, just for a while, just to clear her name. She is led away from her home, and she does not know it, but she will never return. This is how it began, not with evil, not with malice, but with fear, with small things, with small voices, with a spark. And once that spark was lit, the fire was nearly impossible to stop. Inside the church, the air is cool and still. The candles burn low, their wax pooling onto warm wood. You sit on a rough bench, surrounded not by guards, but by watchers, men with crossed arms, women clutching rosaries, a scribe with ink-stained fingers. The priest offers a tired smile, and the questioning begins again. They do not shout, they do not threaten. They ask calmly, patiently, as though your confusion is the only strange thing in the room. Have you ever felt strange while walking in the woods? Have you ever dreamt of animals speaking to you? Do you remember any unusual events after an argument with a neighbor? At first, you answer easily. You laugh a little. The questions seem silly. You're not worried, but then you notice the way they nod to each other, the way they write things down, the way they don't seem to hear your answers, only the silence between them. They are not trying to understand, they are trying to confirm what they already believe. Each new question pulls the noose tighter. Someone recalls you gave them a salve once years ago for aching joints. They say it worked at first, but then the pain returned. Worse, could that have been a trick? Another says they saw you walk behind the churchyard during a full moon. Why were you there? What were you doing? You say you were collecting herbs. They ask for what purpose? You say for a tonic. They say a tonic for what? You begin to falter. You're not sure what answer will be safe. A neighbor claims you once sang in the early morning hours, a tune they didn't know, a tune no one had taught them. They say it was unnatural, that it made them feel strange, uneasy. You don't remember singing, but what does that matter now? From there it moves quickly, not with speed, but with inevitability. like a river swollen by days of rain, every drop small, but together enough to drown. You are asked to remain in the church that night. For your safety, they say. It is only precaution. They don't want rumors to spread, but the rumors are already loose, carried by footsteps, by glances, by the absence of your presence in the village the next morning. Children ask where you are. Mothers shush them. Men talk in corners. Bread is broken over uneasy silence. And all the while, your name hangs in the air. You lie on a narrow bench that night. Sleep does not come easily. The church groans with the sound of settling wood. You feel watched, even alone. In the dark, your thoughts stretch and tangle. You remember every strange moment, every awkward silence, every odd look from the past month. Could those have meant something? Could you have done something wrong and not known it? When morning comes, they ask if you're ready to speak more clearly. They say the truth is freeing. They say confession is cleansing. They say others have already come forward. You ask others. They do not answer. Instead, they ask again. Have you ever made a pact? Ever spoken a name you should not? Ever been visited in dreams by a shadowed figure? You shake your head, but your voice feels smaller. They ask about your family, your childhood. Did your mother ever teach you things? Did your grandmother speak to spirits? Were there stories in your home that others did not hear? You begin to wonder what they want from you. A name, a word, a detail. They ask if you ever wished ill on someone, not seriously, just in passing. Did you ever say, I hope her bread spoils? One of them asks, did you ever mutter something in frustration? You say yes, once. About your neighbor's dog, it barked all night, and you said you hoped it would lose its voice. They write that down. And just like that, you are no longer harmless. You are no longer misunderstood. You are a danger, a threat, a witch. You ask to go home. They say no, not yet. Someone will visit your house, they say, to make sure there's nothing suspicious. This is a formality, they assure you. But at your home they find things. A jar of dried herbs, a bird's feather, a bundle of red thread, a small stone with a hole through it. They bring these things back and lay them on the table. What are these? They ask. You try to explain. The herbs are for teas. The feather was found in the woods. The thread belonged to your mother. The stone is just a stone. They listen, they nod, and they write. Later that day, more people come to watch. The word spreads. No longer just a question. Your trial has become entertainment. A warning, a story in the making. The spark, so small in its beginning, now burns through every corner of the village. You sit quietly. You don't speak anymore. There is nothing left to say. The next morning, they call for more formal questioning. You are led into a room that is colder, darker. A magistrate has arrived from a nearby town. His clothing is finer. His words are clipped, measured. He does not know you. He does not need to. He reads from a sheet of paper, listing accusations like they are already facts. He asks if you deny them. You say yes. He asks again. You say no. He watches your hands, your mouth, your eyes. He is not listening to the words. He is watching for weakness. A woman from the village testifies. She says she felt sick after touching your door. A man says his milk soured when you passed his house. Another says his dreams have been dark since you lent him a jar of ointment. They all sound certain. They all sound afraid. You say these are lies, but you say it quietly. Then they bring in a child. A girl, perhaps 10. She is small, thin, her eyes wide with worry. She does not look at you. She looks at the priest instead. She tells them she saw you dancing. She says it was night. She says there was a strange light. She says you flew. No one questions how. No one asks for proof. The words are enough. The girl is praised for her bravery. You are told to think carefully, that children do not lie. You are offered one final chance to confess, to cleanse your soul, to save yourself. But you have nothing to confess. And so they decide the trial must begin. And now the spark is ablaze, not a fire of justice, but of fear, fueled by every wound and whisper the village has buried. It started with a glance, a word, a shadow, and now it burns everything you are. And still, you don't know why. Chapter 4. The accusation, already guilty. The accusation is not a beginning. It is an ending, in disguise. By the time your name is spoken aloud, the decision has already been made, not formally, not legally, but silently, among the people who have watched you from a distance. In their eyes, your fate has taken shape. The accusation is merely a performance now, a step in the ritual of fear. You are already guilty. The village no longer waits for evidence. It waits only for confirmation. You are summoned to the center of town, not with violence, but with formality. The scribe records your name. The priest recites a prayer. The magistrate clears his throat. The crowd gathers not to witness a trial, but to observe a process. They are not here to learn the truth. They are here to see it declared. And you, still dazed, still trying to understand, stand before them like a shadow. The words spoken are familiar. They always are. Suspicion of maleficence, unnatural practices, witchcraft. You do not even recognize the phrases at first. They fall like ash from the air, soft, weightless, but they leave stains wherever they land. You are asked to speak. You begin with a denial. You say you do not understand. You say this is a mistake. You say you have never harmed anyone. And as the words leave your mouth, you can feel how empty they sound. Not because they are untrue, but because the people listening are no longer able to hear you. Their minds are full of stories, full of fear, full of certainty. They do not ask for your side, they ask for your confession. The questioning continues. This is not the interrogation, not yet. This is the stage of polite disbelief. The moment when they let you try to convince them, knowing you will not succeed. They ask where you were last Tuesday, when the baker's child grew sick. You say you were home. They ask if anyone saw you. You say no. They nod, as though that proves something. They ask about the marks on your arms, the small round scars, the freckle near your elbow. You say they have always been there. They say witches have marks. You say nothing. They ask about the herbs in your kitchen. You say they are for tea, for illness, for wounds. They say they are for spells. You begin to understand that every answer you give will lead back to the same place. Then someone steps forward. A woman from the village. She says you once looked at her strangely, that her bread failed to rise the next morning, that her dog would not enter the room where you had stood. She looks sad, almost apologetic. She says she hopes this is all a mistake, but her eyes say otherwise. Then a man speaks. He says he saw you walking at night, that your feet made no sound, that your head was uncovered, that you looked straight at the moon and did not blink. You say nothing now. More voices follow, each one adding something small. A gesture, a word, a feeling. They are not describing you. They are not describing an idea, a fear, a figure that was already drawn in their minds, waiting for a face. And now it has yours. You are led to a room, not a cell, not yet, where you are told to wait. The windows high. The door closes behind you with a sound that is not loud, but final. Hours pass. Or perhaps a day, you do not know. Food arrives, barely warm. Water is brought in a cracked cup. No one speaks to you. You think of your home, your things. The bed still unmade. The fire left to die. You wonder who has entered, who has touched your life in your absence, who has searched your drawers, your shelves, your corners. They will find something. They must. A scrap of paper, a broken twig, a piece of cloth, anything that can be held up and declared unnatural. The next time the door opens, it is the magistrate who returns. He does not ask how you are. He asks if you are ready to confess. You say no. He nods, as if he expected that. He says it is not unusual. He says it often takes time. Then he leaves, and again the silence returns. This is the shape of an accusation in 1600s Europe. It is not a fire that flares. It is a slow, choking fog. It does not rush. It surrounds. Outside the room, the world continues. Children play in the fields. Bread is baked. Bells ring. And yet, your name has become something else. It is no longer yours. It is a word that makes others flinch. A story that grows with each telling. People ask, "Have you heard?" They say, "I always thought there was something strange." They remember things that never happened. They forget the kindnesses you gave, and you, sitting alone in a bare room, feel yourself begin to vanish. The accusation is not loud. It does not shout. It whispers. And the more it whispers, the more certain it becomes. Not because it is true, but because it has been said. The next day, or what you think is the next, they bring you before the council again. This time, there are more men present, and their faces are stiffer, less interested in pleasantries. They tell you they have heard more testimony. They speak in vague terms, but the meaning is clear. Your reputation has unraveled. You are told that others have named you, that there are witnesses, that a servant boy saw you standing outside a stable whispering to the animals, that an elderly woman says you appeared in her dreams and told her to burn her Bible. These claims are absurd, you think, but the way they are delivered, with such calm finality, you begin to wonder if they even matter. You are no longer being evaluated. You are being processed. They ask again if you would like to confess. This time, they imply that doing so may bring leniency. They say that confession is the path to forgiveness, that the community does not want to punish you, only to save you. You shake your head. You feel tired, not defiant, just empty. They nod, then call in the healer, an older woman, well known in the region. She is tasked with examining you for marks, not scars, not bruises, but signs, blemishes, birthmarks, or small places on your skin said to be given by the devil, spots that do not bleed when pricked, spots that feel no pain. She is not cruel. She does not wish you harm. She simply does her duty. She makes you remove your garments. She studies your body as if it is a page from a book. She touches gently, but you feel exposed in ways that have nothing to do with skin. You are made to stand for hours, to endure her gaze and her silence. She finds a mole on your back. She presses it. You do not flinch. She writes that down. Later, they say it is proof. The room where you sleep now is colder. The door is locked. There is no fire. The food is worse. The cup has cracks. You wake often in the night. Sometimes you think you hear things. Voices, footsteps, scratching. You begin to lose track of what is real. Your thoughts tangle. You remember dreams as if they happened. You forget entire days. When the magistrate returns, he tells you there will be a formal trial, that the people must hear what you have done, that the community deserves clarity, even justice. You ask again, "What have I done?" He looks at you. For a moment you think he pities you. Then he says, "You were named." Outside you hear the bell toll. You wonder who has died. Then you wonder if it is you. The accusation becomes something bigger than itself. It becomes a spectacle, a point of conversation at the well, a warning told to children, a lesson tucked into sermons. Your life is no longer private, it is public property. It is a symbol. They begin to speak not of you, but about you. They debate your intentions, your past, your soul. You hear your own story recited by people who never knew you. You hear lies told with confidence, embroidered with memory and imagination. The space between fact and fear has vanished. You no longer respond to the guards when they call your name. It sounds foreign now, tainted, not yours. One morning, a guard places a folded note in your hand. No one sees. You open it with trembling fingers. It says, "They came for my sister too." Nothing more. You stare at it for hours. And then the council calls for you once more. They ask you again, will you confess? You do not answer. They say that silence is also an answer. And once again, you are led away. The next days are slower or faster. You can no longer tell. They do not speak to you much. Only when necessary, a basin of water, a crust of bread, a muttered prayer at your door. The priest visits once and reads aloud from scripture. You do not speak, you listen. But the words pass over you like wind across stone. You dream more now, of your childhood, of the stream near your home, of your mother's voice, though you cannot remember her face. You wake with your hands clenched, not knowing why. When they summon you again, they bring others, outsiders, people from nearby towns. They are here to observe, to ensure the trial is proper, to ensure that justice, as they define it, is done. They ask questions again, the same ones, rephrased, rearranged. They tell you others have confessed, that you were seen with them, that your names were spoken together. You do not know these people, but that does not matter. They ask if you have read certain books. You have not. They ask if you have danced in certain fields. You have not. They ask if you have ever wished for something bad to happen to someone else. You do not answer. They write this down. Later, a woman you once helped steps forward. She says you were always kind, that you nursed her through fever, that you gave her soup when no one else did. She says she cannot believe the stories, that she will pray for you. She is removed from the room. The court is not interested in character, only in control. They tell you your fate is in your hands, that mercy is possible, that others who confessed were spared the worst. You consider, not because it is true, but because it is the only way out. You ask what will happen if you do confess. They say it depends on your sincerity, on your willingness to name others, on how useful you can still be. You are not a person to them anymore. You are a vessel, a function, a means to quiet their fear. You look down at your hands. The skin is dry. The nails are cracked. You think of your garden, of the smell of time, of the way the sun warmed the edge of your doorway, of the cat who used to follow you, of how quiet the mornings were. And then you look up and you say nothing, not because you are strong, but because there is nothing left to give, and the accusation, so small at first, so simple, has now become a sentence, not of death, but of erasure. They do not see you anymore, only what they believe, and belief here is stronger than truth. It is stronger than you. Chapter 5, the interrogation, confess or die. There is no clock in the room where they keep you, only the changing rhythm of footsteps in the corridor, the slant of light that creeps in through a high, narrow window, and the slow decay of hope. Days blur, nights stretch, and the space between your heartbeats grows wider. When they finally come for you again, it is not sudden, it is not violent, it is simply your turn. The room where they take you is bare but clean. There are no chains on the walls, no smoke, no blood. This is not the dungeon of imagination. It is something quieter and perhaps more dangerous for it. A place that looks almost kind, almost reasonable, almost lawful. You are told to sit. The men who question you do not shout. They do not sneer. They wear robes, not armor. They carry books, not blades. They ask you how you are. They offer you water. They tell you they only want to help. You nod. You do not believe them, but you are too tired to argue. They begin with your past, your childhood, your family. Did your mother ever speak of dreams? Did your grandmother tell old stories? Were there tales in your home of charms, of potions, of spirits? You say yes. You think everyone's family had stories like that. They nod. They write that down. They ask if you've ever seen strange animals, if you've felt a presence in your room at night, if you've ever had thoughts that did not feel like your own. You say no. They ask again. They ask if you're sure. You say you think so. They write that down too. You realize that every answer you give is fuel, that your certainty is suspicion, and your doubt is confession, that no matter what you say, it will be used. Then they begin the ritual of exhaustion. They ask the same questions again, slightly reworded, slightly rearranged, again and again. Morning turns to afternoon. The candles burn lower. They do not let you rest. You sit in that wooden chair until your body aches from stillness, until your voice begins to fail. They offer you a blanket and you cry, not because of the kindness, but because you understand now how it works. They speak of your neighbors, of what they've said, of how the village is frightened, of how the priest has prayed for your soul. They say they believe you can still be saved, but only if you tell the truth, only if you confess. You say you have nothing to confess. They say that everyone has something. They let silence fill the room. It goes on like this for days, or hours, or years. Time loses shape. You stop knowing when you last slept, when you last ate, when you last felt the outside air. Your thoughts slow, then twist. You begin to wonder if you did do something, if some careless word, some small act could have caused harm. You wonder if intention matters. They ask if you ever hated anyone. You say yes. They ask if you ever wished for harm. You say yes, but not seriously. They ask if you think those wishes had power. You say no. They ask again. You are silent. They say silence is guilt. You try to think of a way to explain yourself that does not sound like an excuse. You cannot. They bring in a book. It contains testimonies, written in elegant script, signed and dated. You read the names, familiar names, names of people you once trusted. They say you bewitched their animals, that you stole their dreams, that you called storms with your breath. You begin to feel unsteady. They ask if you understand the seriousness of your situation. You nod. They ask again if you are ready to speak. You say you don't know what to say. They lean in. Tell us what you did. You whisper, I didn't do anything. They say, that set's not what we heard. Then they rise, and they leave you alone again. And this, perhaps, is the heart of the interrogation. Not the questions themselves, but the spaces between them, the stillness, the isolation, the slow stripping away of certainty. They do not want the truth. They want agreement, and eventually, if they keep you long enough, if they keep asking gently enough, if they keep turning the light just so, they believe you will give it to them. And sometimes you do. They call you again the next morning. Your body is sore from the stone floor. Your mouth is dry. You do not remember when you last spoke without shaking. The questions resume. This time they are more direct. Did you ever consort with the devil? You say no. Did he ever visit you in the night? You shake your head. Did he ever mark your body with his touch? You begin to weep, not from fear, but from exhaustion. They speak of the devil as if he were a man who walks the village roads, as if he knocks at doors and whispers through keyholes, as if he lingers in the hedgerows and speaks in the voice of a bird. They ask again, did you ever feel him near? You say nothing. They press further. Have you ever been angry? Have you ever desired revenge? Have you ever wished someone gone? You nod, quietly, because of course you have. They smile. It is the first time they smile. They tell you this is natural, that everyone has moments of weakness, that it's understandable that many begin this way, with a thought, a temptation. A small agreement, they say confession, is not about punishment. It is about healing. They tell you stories of others who confessed, of how they were forgiven, of how they were spared. You ask where they are now. They do not answer. They ask if you would like to sleep, if you would like the questioning to stop, if you would like to feel peace. You nod. They say it is simple. Just admit it. Just say the words. You ask which words. They say you already know. Later they bring you food. Warm. This time you are allowed to sit in a softer chair. They let you wash. They give you a dry cloth. You feel human again. It makes you want to believe they care, but you understand what is happening. They are softening you. You are not in chains. You are not in pain. You are in a story, one carefully crafted. A slow dance between weariness and suggestion. They ask again, did you ever speak with spirits? And now you hesitate, because you have dreamed of people who are gone. You have spoken aloud to empty rooms. You have prayed with your eyes closed and hoped for answers. You say yes. Once, in a dream, they nod. They write it down. That night, they let you sleep. But you do not sleep. You stare at the ceiling, and you wonder if the dream was real. If maybe, at some point, something happened that you cannot remember. Something unholy, something silent. Something that lives in the cracks of memory. And this is how it works. Not through fear alone, but through doubt. You begin to question your own story, your own mind. And once that begins, there is very little left to hold on to. The next day, the scribe is there. The ink pot is ready. The parchment is fresh. They tell you that many have already spoken against you, that you are only confirming what they already know, that this is your opportunity to set things right. They do not demand a full confession, only a beginning. They ask for a single name. You say none. They ask for a single date. You say nothing. They ask what you felt when the child grew sick. You say you felt sorrow. They ask if it was guilt. You close your eyes. The scribe dips his quill, and you speak, not because you believe, but because you are tired, because the room is warm, and the food is waiting, and your name has already been decided, and because you are human, and humans, when crushed long enough, sometimes give in. You speak of a night long ago. You say you heard something. You say you thought you saw a shadow. You say you muttered a word. They ask which word. You invent one. They nod. They ask for more, and still more. And now, at last, they smile again. Because this, here, is what they wanted. Not truth, but surrender. When the confession is done, or what they believe is enough, they let you rest. But the rest is hollow. You are not at peace. You are not saved. You are not forgiven. You are simply quiet. They read your words back to you, slowly, carefully, as if reciting scripture. You nod at each line, not because it is true, but because it is done. You no longer care what it says. They ask you to sign. You hesitate. They remind you of what you've been given: warmth, food, comfort. You sign. They fold the parchment, seal it. You are led back to your room. Outside the walls, the village prepares. The trial will begin soon. The real one, with formality, with a judge, with a crowd. But everyone already knows the outcome, because you confessed, and that is all they ever wanted. It does not matter what the confession contains. It does not matter if it makes sense. It exists. And so you are guilty. You sit in the dark, and you realize something cruel. They would have continued forever, not until they believed, but until you did. Because belief is contagious. Because doubt can rot the soul. Because once you question your innocence, they do not need to. You have become their mirror, their reflection of fear, their vessel for pain. And now, even if you were freed, you would not be whole. Because you are no longer the person who walked into that room. You are someone else now. Someone who signed their name beside a lie. Someone who chose silence over truth. Someone who survived the interrogation, but not without cost. In the following days, you are left alone. The questions have stopped. The food arrives quietly. The guards say nothing. You should feel relieved, but instead, you feel empty. The silence is not peace, it is absence. You wait for something, a sound, a word, a reason. But there is none. You are no longer useful. You have been emptied of your story. Your name has been signed into their book. You are finished. The villagers talk about you as though you no longer exist. A name on their tongues, a tale for children, a lesson for others. You are the warning now. And the most painful part is knowing that it worked. They did not beat you. They did not chain you. They did not need to. All they had to do was keep asking and waiting and watching you unravel. You understand now why others confessed before you, not because they were guilty, but because they were exhausted, because they wanted the waiting to end, because silence is a slow poison, and confession, even false, is a kind of breath. You stare at the wall. The crack that runs from the floor to the ceiling is now familiar. You trace it with your eyes. Over and over, you are still here, still breathing, but you are no longer whole. You are what remains after the questions, and the questions you know are not done with you. They will return for others, in other rooms, in other villages, and someone else one day will sit where you sat and be asked again and again and again until they say yes. Chapter 6. The Witchfinder. The self-proclaimed hunters. They did not always wear robes. They did not always come with warrants or crests or titles backed by kings. Sometimes they wore black, sometimes brown. Sometimes they wore whatever kept them warm as they moved from town to town, village to village, name to name. These were the witchfinders. Not judges, not priests, not soldiers, something in between, something outside. They came with books, not swords, manuals of signs and symptoms, guides to uncovering hidden evils. They carried pins and needles, ropes, lists of questions. They knew how to read a body for marks, how to read a face for lies. They knew how to speak softly and how to make you speak. And when they arrived, everything changed. You could feel it, in the way the air shifted, in the way the elders stood up straighter, in the way the priest paused his sermon, adjusted his collar, and stepped aside. The witchfinder needed no permission. His authority was self-made, but widely accepted. In a world of uncertainty, he offered certainty. In a world of fear, he offered action. He claimed to see what others could not, and people believed him because they needed someone to believe. He spoke calmly, patiently. He asked the right questions. He knew how to turn a village against itself, and he always found witches, because that was what he was paid to do, and often paid well. Some were men of faith, some were men of ambition, some were simply men who understood how fear worked, how it made people vulnerable, compliant, and generous. In England, there was Matthew Hopkins, the infamous witchfinder general. He worked during the 1640s, claiming to root out Satan's servants wherever he traveled. He was not appointed by any church or state, but communities welcomed him, begged for him, even, and paid him for every witch he uncovered. He said little, listened often. He watched the way people spoke, the way they touched their hair, the way they paused before answering. He believed witches bore marks that did not bleed. He believed they floated in water. He believed they consorted with familiars, spirits in the form of animals, and he asked children to name them. And they did. They gave names like Vinegar Tom, Pyewacket, and Grizzle Greedigut. These were not names of witches, but of fear given form, and the witchfinder wrote them all down. Other men followed his path, in other regions, with other names and methods, but the pattern was always the same. Enter, observe, divide, accuse, profit. He would stay only long enough to leave damage in his wake. The village, once quiet, would be left with broken families, buried bodies, and questions no one dared ask. He did not stay to answer them, because by then he was gone, moving on to the next town, the next accusation, the next confession, and people called for him. They sent letters, they raised money, they pleaded, not because they were cruel, but because they were afraid. The witchfinder offered a service. He offered the illusion of safety. He offered a face to the fear and a knife to cut it away. He was not the storm. He was the hand that pointed to the clouds. And when he pointed at you, there was nowhere left to run. The tools he brought were simple. A pin to prick the skin, a bowl of water for swimming, a rope for binding, a list of questions, sharp and deliberate, and silence. Always silence. because the silence between questions said more than any scream. Do you speak to animals? Have you ever made a charm? Were you born under an unusual sign? Do people avoid you? Have crops failed near your home? Have children cried at your presence? Do you dream? And no matter how you answered, it was enough, because the test was not about truth. It was about tension. He would hold up your life like parchment against a flame and watch to see where it darkened first. And if he found a mark, a mole, a birthmark, a scar, he would press it with a needle. If you bled, he said you were lucky. If you did not, he said you were damned. Some witch-finders were more brutal. They used ropes and thumbscrews. They kept people awake for days. They asked questions until the answers were nonsense. Then they wrote those answers down and called them fact. Others used no tools at all, just presence, just patience, just the careful shaping of reality, until even the accused began to wonder. And that was the true danger. Not the questions, but the way they made you question yourself. You would start to believe, not in magic, but in guilt. You would wonder if something you did, something you said, something you thought, had opened the door to darkness. Because if they were so sure, how could they be wrong? That was the power of the witchfinder. He did not just accuse, he made you accuse yourself. And when he left, the village was never the same, not because he had found a witch, but because he had taught everyone how to look for one, and now they could find them anywhere. The witchfinder did not always need to be invited. Sometimes the mere mention of his name was enough to begin the process. Villagers would whisper, "We should send for someone," and someone always knew who to send for. Word would travel quickly, and the witchfinder would arrive days or weeks later, quiet, prepared, already knowing what to look for. The villagers would not question him. He came with confidence. He came with stories of other places. He carried the weight of belief and spoke in the language of certainty. They wanted to believe him because he seemed unafraid, and when he pointed to a person, they saw their fears reflected, and so he began his work. He often started with observations: who looked nervous, who looked down when spoken to, who had a limp or a scar or a history. He walked the streets slowly. He let people talk. He gave them space to accuse each other without saying a word himself. Children were among his favorite witnesses, not because they knew truth, but because they could be shaped. A frightened child could be convinced they had seen something. A dream could be turned into a memory. A nightmare could be turned into a testimony. The line between imagination and confession was fragile, and the witchfinder knew how to cross it. In many cases, he did not need to lay a hand on anyone. He simply gathered stories. The girl who had a fever, the old woman who walked alone, the man who muttered to himself. He compiled them into a case, and he presented them to the village not as evidence, but as confirmation. And by then, the village was ready. The accused were brought forward. The questions were asked. The familiar routine began. He would stand silently in the back of the room, his hands behind his back, his eyes steady. He rarely intervened. His presence was enough. He had already taught them what to do. And when the accused broke down, when they confessed, or even when they did not, the witchfinder would be paid. Sometimes in coin, sometimes in goods, sometimes in promises of favor. He never stayed long, because he could not afford to. The longer he stayed, the more questions might be asked, the more inconsistencies might be noticed, the more people might realize that fear had led them down a dark road with no map. So he moved on, and in his wake he left chaos, families broken, graves filled, villages split by silence and suspicion. The witchfinder was not a judge. He passed no sentence, but his presence ensured that one would come. And what made him most dangerous was not that he lied, but that he believed. He believed in evil. He believed in his mission. He believed that what he did was necessary. And in that belief, there was no room for mercy, no room for doubt, no room for you. Because to the witchfinder, you were never a person. You were a symptom, a sign, a problem to be solved. And when he left, others would take his place. Not other witch-finders, but villagers, now trained in suspicion, now eager to test their own hands at the practice. They would watch each other more closely. They would speak more carefully. They would pray more loudly, and they would never forget what it felt like to point and be believed. The witch-finder had shown them the power, and they would use it. In this way, the witch-finder's greatest success was not the people he accused. It was the fear he left behind. Because long after he was gone, the trials continued. The accusations multiplied. The stories grew, and no one needed to be taught anymore. They already knew what to look for. And once you know what to look for, you begin to find it everywhere, even in yourself. And there were others, men who saw what witch-finders could earn, and copied their steps. They did not always believe. Some were opportunists, some were cruel, some simply saw a way to earn coin where the law turned a blind eye. All they needed was a voice that carried, a reputation that preceded them, and a community hungry for certainty. They dressed the part. They memorized the words. They practiced the questions. They rehearsed the rituals of suggestion. They knew which types of people to watch. The old, the unmarried, the strange, the stubborn. They used the same tools. They walked the same road. And no one stopped them because they offered results. And in a world where fear festered and spread, no one wanted to admit they were wrong. No one wanted to question the people who brought them closure, even if that closure came at the price of a neighbor's life. So the witch-finders multiplied, and the flames did too. By the time doubt arrived, years later, decades even, it was too late. The damage was done. The names had been spoken, the confessions written, the graves filled, and what remained was silence. A silence shaped by guilt, by questions no one dared ask anymore, by the stories passed down only in hushed tones. You see, the witch-finder's legacy was not the trials themselves. It was the mindset, the quiet, creeping idea that danger lived next door, that the unusual must be unnatural, that certainty is worth more than truth. And long after the witch-finder's name was forgotten, that idea remained. It lingers still, because fear is easy to pass down, and suspicion is taught more quickly than compassion. And the worst part is that, in their minds, they were not villains. They were protectors. They were defenders of order. They were men who believed they were saving the world, one accusation at a time. And so the cycle endured, until belief finally withered, until reason found its footing again. But for you, in the middle of it, there is no such comfort. You live in the world the witch-finder built, a world where guilt is assumed, where silence is a sentence, where your only defense is to disappear. And even that may not be enough, because once you are seen, truly seen by the witch-finder, you are already lost. Even now, centuries later, the ghost of the witch-finder walks with us, not in form, not in name, but in every question asked without kindness, in every judgment made in fear, and in every silence that follows the pointing of a finger. Chapter 7, Trial Day. A performance for the crowd. The day does not begin with thunder. It does not open with screams or howling wind. It begins with quiet. You wake up before the sun rises, not because you were disturbed, but because you were waiting. The anticipation has lived inside your bones for days. This day was promised. It was inevitable. And now it has arrived. The cell is colder than before. Or perhaps it is you who has grown thinner. Either way, you feel every stone, every draft, every sound. A door creaks open down the hallway. Footsteps, then silence. When they come for you, they do not shout. They do not threaten. They simply open the door and wait. You rise because you have to. You walk because there is no other direction to go. Outside, the air is grey. The clouds do not move. The wind holds its breath. The people are already gathering. This is not a secret proceeding. This is not a hidden ritual. This is a trial, public, official, and expected. It is a performance in every sense of the word. There is a stage, there is an audience, There are characters and roles and scripts, and you have been cast as the villain. You see the faces of your neighbors. Some look at you, most do not. A few children whisper. An older man crosses himself. A woman pulls her shawl tighter and turns away. They know you, or they did. Now they know something else. But today, they are safe. Because today, the fear has a name. Yours. You are led to the center of the square. Wooden boards creak beneath your feet. The platform is raised, just enough so all can see. Visibility matters. Truth does not. The judge arrives late. That is part of the performance. His arrival is meant to signal importance, gravity, and power. His robes are clean. His hands are soft. He sits high above the crowd, but low enough that everyone can see his face. Stern, unmoved, almost bored. The clerk reads aloud the charges. You hear your name, then a pause, then the list. It is not short. Consorting with spirits, blighting crops, speaking in tongues, sending illness, summoning storms, drinking the blood of infants. Each charge lands in the crowd like a stone thrown in water, quiet at first, then rippling outward. Some shake their heads, others murmur, a few smile. You stand still. You are not allowed to speak. Your advocate, if you have one, is silent. They will not defend your innocence. Their task is to ensure the performance continues smoothly. They may clarify your answers. If asked, they may request mercy, if permitted, but they will not argue for your life, because mercy is not the point of this day. The judge nods. The first witness is called, a neighbor, someone you have seen every day for years. Their hands shake slightly as they climb the steps. They do not meet your gaze. They speak of strange noises, of dead birds, of milk turning sour. They say they never wanted to believe, but signs cannot be ignored. They are sorry, they say, but not sorry enough. Another witness follows, and another, a child, who says they saw you speaking to a black dog. A midwife, who remembers the time a baby was born, weak in your presence. A man who says he once touched your hand and dreamed of fire. Each voice is calm, each story practiced. No one questions the logic. No one challenges the memories. No one pauses to wonder why all these stories have emerged now, together, with such clarity. Because the trial is not a search for truth, it is a confirmation of fear. And you, standing silent, tired, thinner than before, are the answer to a question no one wants to admit they asked. You are led forward to speak. The judge asks simple questions. Do you deny these charges? Do you understand what you are accused of? Do you wish to confess? And here, the air grows heavy. Not because your answer matters, but because your answer determines the next act of the play. If you say no, you are defiant. If you say yes, you are guilty. If you hesitate, you are both. You speak, but the crowd does not react to your words. They react to your voice, to your posture, to the way you hold your hands. They study your eyes. They look for tremors. They listen for trembles. They are not judging your answers. They are judging your performance. This is theater, and in theater, the script is only part of the show. You are allowed to call witnesses. Few come, fewer speak well. They stumble. They contradict. They remember things differently. They are unsure. Their defense sounds like doubt, and doubt in this place is treason. You realize slowly that your trial is not about what you did. It is about who you are. You are tired. You are different. You are alone. And that is enough. The judge calls for the final part of the day's proceeding, the test. The trial must have a conclusion, and the crowd must be satisfied. It will not be fire. Not yet. That comes later. First, they will search for marks. You are brought behind a curtain. You are examined. Every inch of your skin is scrutinized. Birthmarks, scars, freckles, anything unusual, anything unnatural. They look for spots that do not bleed. They call them witch sits marks. You try not to shiver. You try not to speak, because here, modesty is guilt. Silence is guilt. existence is guilt, and when they find a mark, and they always do, they bring the news to the crowd. The crowd does not cheer. That would be uncivilized. They nod, they whisper, they tighten their coats. They believe the judge speaks a final time. He does not declare your sentence yet. That comes after the deliberation. But you already know, because the play has been performed many times before, and it always ends the same way. You are led back to your cell. You walk past the crowd. No one spits. No one throws stones. They do not need to. Their silence is enough. It says everything. You have become the story, and the story must end, but not before the next day. The final scene is being prepared, and all that remains is for you to return to your place, so that tomorrow they can return to theirs. That night, you do not sleep, not because you are afraid that came before. What you feel now is something quieter, a strange calm, the stillness of inevitability. You are not hoping for rescue. You are not bargaining with gods. You are simply waiting. The sounds of the village change as night deepens. No longer the clamor of footsteps or the murmurs of judgment. Now it is the crackling of torches, the occasional cough, the creak of wooden beams settling into place. The square is being prepared. Somewhere outside, they are building the stage. Not a platform this time, a pyre. The wood is stacked carefully, dry and seasoned. Bundles of twigs, chopped logs, straw at the base. They do it quietly, with method, with rhythm, as though it were any other chore. To them this is not a festival. It is not a celebration. It is maintenance. The town must be kept pure, safe, ordered. The fire is not for vengeance. It is for control. And in the morning the sun will rise as it always does. The sky will be soft. The birds will sing, and they will bring you out again. You imagine it as you lie on the cold stone floor, the tightness in your legs, the light in your eyes, the smell of smoke, the hands holding your arms, firm, not cruel, the priest whispering the final rites, the ropes, the hush before the spark. You imagine the moment of heat and the silence that follows, not because you want to, but because that silence is the only thing left that belongs to you. You think of your name, not the one they shouted, the one that lived before this, the one your mother whispered when you were born. You remember the sound of it, you say it, softly, just once, to the stone, because tomorrow it will be taken. And with it, the last piece of who you were, outside. The firewood waits, and the story moves toward its final line. Not because of what you did, but because that is how this play ends. As dawn breaks, your cell is opened one last time. The guard does not speak. There is no ceremony in his motion, only duty. He has done this before. He does not meet your eyes. He simply gestures toward the door. Outside, the square is full again. People are quieter today. The energy is different. Not anticipation, not celebration, something closer to resignation. A knowledge that this too is necessary. You walk with steady steps. You do not cry. You do not plead. There is no strength left for that. Only the weight of your body, moving forward, step by step. The platform has changed. It is now a pillar of wood, bound in rope, surrounded by kindling. There are guards nearby, but they are not tense. They are simply part of the backdrop. A priest approaches. He offers you a final chance to repent. His voice is soft. His face is kind. He believes this is mercy. You look at him and say nothing. The crowd shifts. Some look away. Some close their eyes. You are led to the stake. The ropes are tied. Not tightly. They need not be. You are not trying to escape. You are simply trying to stay whole for one last moment. The executioner steps forward. He holds a torch. His face is blank. And for a moment, everything is still. The wind pauses. The sky does not move. Time folds inward. You close your eyes. And then the crackle begins. Not with a roar, but with a whisper. A lick of flame. A curling of smoke. A breath of heat. The crowd remains silent. because this is not a show anymore. It is a ritual, and as the smoke rises, you disappear, not in body, but in memory. In that moment, you are not the villain. You are the ending, and the story begins again. When the flames are gone, and the crowd has left, only ash remains. The wood, the stake, the smoke, all fade, but the idea stays. The fear, once sparked, continues in silence. Children are warned to behave. Women walk more carefully. Men speak more cautiously, and no one asks too many questions, because stories do not need facts. They only need endings, and you have provided one. The villagers go home. They do not speak of you, not directly, but your name lingers in pauses, in glances, in the silence, after dinner, in the creak of floorboards at night. You have become part of the architecture, not as a memory, but as a lesson. Children are warned not to wander too far. Women lower their eyes. Men nod without smiling. The town resumes its rhythm, and yet something has changed. An unease buried just beneath the soil, a discomfort that cannot be named, because somewhere, deep down, they all know. It was not justice. It was not protection. It was a story told to keep the fear at bay. And one day they will need another, and someone else will stand where you stood, and the fire will rise again. And though your name fades, your presence does not. You become a warning, passed from mouth to mouth, reshaped with each telling. Some say you confessed. Others say you flew. Some say you cursed them all with your final breath. The truth is forgotten, but the fire remains. And so the wheel turns. The crowd forgets the faces, but they never forget the fear. And fear always finds a new face. That is how the story endures. Chapter 8. The Tools of Torture. Instruments of Confession. It begins with a whisper, a quiet rumor passed behind closed doors, that you have not confessed, that despite the trial, despite the witnesses, despite the signs, you have not yet admitted to your sins. And in this place, silence is not interpreted as strength, it is interpreted as defiance. And defiance must be broken. There is no formal declaration, no public pronouncement. The decision is made behind the heavy wooden doors of the council chamber. You are not invited, you are simply summoned. You are taken not to the court, not to the square, but somewhere else, somewhere colder, somewhere without windows. Stone walls surround you. The air is thick with damp. The floor echoes even the softest footstep. It smells of rust, old oil, and something faintly metallic. The room is not large, but it feels endless. This is where truth is manufactured. They do not call it torture. They call it persuasion. They call it examination. They call it encouragement. But the room tells a different story. The tools laid out on the wooden table do not look like instruments of mercy. There are thumbscrews, small, simple, brutal, a device designed to crush the soft bones of the hand, slowly, deliberately. There is the rack, long and sturdy, with its ropes and winding mechanisms, meant to stretch the body beyond its design. The strappado, too, a hanging torture that dislocates the shoulders, inch by inch. You are shown these things, not used upon, not yet, but shown, as if to say this is the future you have chosen, unless you choose differently. A man in robes stands beside the table. He does not shout, he does not curse. He simply speaks, softly, as though offering you a seat by the fire. Confess, he says. It will be easier for you. But there is no easy in this room. There is only before and after. The first step is always the same. They ask again. They ask if you are ready to confess. They remind you of the charges. They remind you of the witnesses. They remind you that others have confessed before you. That even the innocent, once touched by the devil, must be purged to be made clean. They offer you one more chance. You do not speak, so they begin. They do not leap to the worst. This is not a rushed spectacle. It is a methodical unraveling. First, your wrists are bound tightly behind your back. The ropes bite into your skin. forcing your shoulders to pinch unnaturally. Then the strapado. You are hoisted into the air by the wrists, your body weight pulling against your joints. The pain is not sudden. It builds, a slow, terrible stretch. The shoulders scream before the rest of the body understands what is happening. You do not cry out, not at first, but your breath hitches, your legs dangle. The rope creaks above. The man in robes speaks again. All you must do is confess. Tell us what we already know. But you don't know what they know. What is the story they want? Did you fly through the night? Did you curse a child's name? Did you kiss the devil's hand? The images blur together, a twisted mythology. You could admit to anything, and yet, without the right words, the right script, it would not be enough. Because this is not about guilt, it is about compliance. They lower you. Let your feet touch the ground. Just for a moment, just long enough to offer another chance. Still, you do not speak. Next comes the thumb screw. Your hands are placed inside the device, metal jaws tightening around each digit, slowly, with intent. It is not the pain that breaks most people. It is the sound, the cracking of bone, the sensation of something small and vital being taken apart. You scream this time, and in that scream, they listen, not for content, but for tone. They hear the breaking, but you still do not confess. You do not yet know the script they want to hear, so they change tactics. Now, it is water, a basin, a cloth, a slow, steady pour. Waterboarding, though they do not call it that, they call it cleansing. They say the water purifies the wicked, but all you feel is drowning, again and again without dying. A panic that floods your lungs, your thoughts, your memories. You begin to believe you will never breathe again. And still, they ask, did you consort with demons? Did you curse the crops? Did you steal the breath from sleeping infants? You want to scream yes, if only to make it stop. But you hesitate, not from courage, but from fear of getting it wrong. You've seen what happens to those who confess the wrong story, so you wait, you endure, until the stories start to change. They begin to feed you words. Perhaps you met a man in the woods. Perhaps he had cloven feet. Perhaps he gave you gifts. Did he ask you to do things in return? The sentences are not questions. They are scaffolding, a frame being built for your confession to rest upon. And slowly in your mind, those stories become plausible. You begin to see the man in the woods, the pale moonlight, the smell of sulfur, the touch of hands not quite human. You begin to forget what is yours and what is theirs. And then, one day, or night, or whatever time it is in the windowless dark, you say it. Yes, just once, softly, they stop. The pain does not, but the words begin. You tell them more, not because you remember it, but because they guide you. They nod when you say the right things. They frown when you miss a detail. You learn to speak what they expect, and in doing so, you disappear. The person you were, the silent, unbroken, whole self, fades. What remains is a figure stitched together from fear and story. And this is what they wanted. They take your confession, carefully written and signed with trembling hands. They prepare it for the court. They prepare you for the end. And you sit, once again, in silence. But this time your silence is not defiance. It is absence. But the damage is permanent. You have become the story they needed. And in doing so, you have been erased. In the days that follow, your body begins to fail you. Your hands, once capable of holding a needle or smoothing a child's hair, now tremble even in rest. Your shoulders ache in silence. Breathing feels heavier. Sleep becomes a series of flickering visions, indistinct and endless. You are no longer in the torture chamber, but you carry it with you. It lives in your joints, in the bruises that will not fade, in the echo of screams you no longer remember producing. You speak less. You move less. The guards no longer look at you with suspicion. only with distance, as if you are not quite here anymore, as if they are unsure whether to speak your name, unsure if the thing behind the bars will answer, and in truth you aren't sure either. Some days you forget your own name, not because of the pain, but because so much of you has been replaced by stories told by other people. They visit you again, not to hurt you, not anymore, but to polish the tale, to perfect the version of you that will be read aloud. They ask questions they already know the answers to. They want to ensure consistency, believability, a good ending. You comply. It is easier now. What was once unimaginable now feels like inevitability. You say you flew. You say you danced with demons. You say you poisoned the well. You say you signed the book, and they nod, gently, approvingly. Sometimes they even thank you. The priest comes one night and prays with you. He does not speak of forgiveness, only of closure. He says the people will rest easier now, that your honesty has spared others from harm, that your confession is an act of mercy. You want to ask, mercy for whom? But the words do not come. When they leave, you sit in the dark, your back to the wall, your hands folded like a child in church. You hear footsteps above, not many, but enough. They are building something. You already know what it is. Tomorrow, or the next day, you will be taken out. You will be read aloud. Your confession, the carefully crafted fiction made from pain and suggestion, will be repeated as truth. The people will nod. The judges will sign. And you will become a page in a book, a lesson, a warning, an example, but never a person again. What they took from you in that room, with the rack and the rope and the water and the silence, was not your body, though that suffered. It was not your innocence, though that too was discarded. It was your narrative. They took control of your story, and now, even in death, it will not belong to you. You lean your head back against the wall, you breathe, and you wait, because that is all that is left. And then comes the morning. You are led once more through the stone corridors. This time, there is no resistance in your step, no tension in your shoulders, only the quiet resignation of someone who has been emptied. The guard does not speak. The priest does not look you in the eye. You are no longer dangerous. You are no longer mysterious. You are something far worse. You are familiar. The air outside is cold, but not cruel. The sky is pale. There is no wind. The crowd is smaller now, quieter. They have come not for justice, but for ritual. Your story has already been written. They are here to hear it repeated. One last time, a man stands before them with a parchment. He clears his throat. He reads. He speaks of darkness and demons. He speaks of temptation and treachery. He speaks of the devil's mark, and your name spoken with certainty becomes a symbol of what must be removed. You listen. It is not your voice in the confession, but it is your name, and that is enough. When the reading is done, there is no outcry, no cheer, only stillness. The fire is lit, and as it rises, the people bow their heads, not in mourning, but in relief, because the story has been told, the fear has been named, the threat has been ended. They believe they are safe again, and in that belief, they walk away, lighter. But you, the true you, is gone. The fire did not destroy you, it replaced you. And in the years to come, when others whisper your name, it will not be with sorrow, it will be with warning. And no one will ask what really happened in that chamber, because the truth was never the point. And so the chamber remains empty for now, waiting for the next silence to fill it. Somewhere, far from here, another town will awaken tomorrow. Its streets will be swept. Its market will open. Its children will laugh and run barefoot on the stones. But beneath that normalcy, there will be stories, small, buried stories, about what happens to those who are different, too proud, too quiet, too loud, stories about demons and witches. And behind those stories, always, a room like the one you remember, always a man in robes, Always tools laid out neatly, always a silence waiting to be broken. Your name will not be mentioned, but your story will live on, repurposed, reshaped, reused, not for truth, but for control. And in that way, the fire never really goes out. It only waits. Chapter 9, The Aftermath, Life After Accusation. Not everyone died. That's a truth often forgotten. In the retelling of witch trials, not every accused woman or man was burned or hanged. Some survived, but survival was not salvation. The ones who walked away from the trial, who confessed the right words at the right time, who endured just enough pain to break without shattering, they were not free. They were simply changed, marked. You are one of them. When the doors open and you step outside, blinking into the light for the first time in weeks, nothing is familiar. The town square is the same. The buildings, the roads, the trees, all just as they were, but nothing feels the same. You walk differently, slower, perhaps, or lighter, as if you are afraid of leaving footprints. People see you, but they do not approach. They do not greet you. They nod, if they nod at all, with a kind of cautious acknowledgement, as if you are a fire that once burned too hot and might reignite. And in their eyes, you are no longer neighbor, sister, mother, or friend. You are something else, now, something that survived when perhaps it shouldn't have. And that is its own kind of fear. You return home, if your home still stands. In some cases, it does. In others, it has been seized, boarded, or burned. Not always officially, but often through neglect or quiet approval. A broken window, a missing door, a sagging roof that no one thought to repair. And even if the structure remains, the life inside does not. Your bed feels unfamiliar. The walls seem closer than before. The silence is heavier. You begin to realize that your sentence was not limited to the courtroom or the chamber. It has followed you back into every hallway and room of your life. You try to resume simple tasks, drawing water, preparing food, stitching torn cloth. But your hands do not obey as they once did. They shake. They pause. They forget. You avoid mirrors, not out of vanity, but because when you look into them you see someone else. Someone who speaks less, who flinches at shadows, who listens for footsteps at night. Some friends return, or try to. They bring bread, they speak softly, they offer to sit with you. But there is always a distance, invisible and vast. They look at you and see a story they cannot understand, a trial they cannot imagine. And the questions hang in the air, unspoken. Did you lie to survive? Did you really do those things? Did something happen to you in that room that changed you? You begin to ask those same questions of yourself. Your dreams are fractured. Sometimes you relive the moments, the accusations, the pain, the voices. Other times, the dreams are stranger. You float above the village. You see fires in every home. You watch people whisper your name like a spell. You do not sleep through the night anymore. You walk the edges of the fields during twilight. You stare into the woods. You listen for the wind and the rustle of leaves. The devil's forest, they called it once. Now, you wonder if it was only fear wearing the shape of trees. Some women who return from accusation never speak of it again. They remarry, they bear children, they host dinners. They reweave themselves into the fabric of village life. Others retreat. They become herbalists, midwives, widows who speak to no one. They live on the outskirts, not because they are forced to, but because it is the only place that feels honest. You don't know which one you are yet. Each day is an experiment. Each moment is a test, and society never forgets. The church may offer absolution, but the town offers only memory, and memory is not kind. The priest visits. He speaks of endurance. He says your suffering was sanctified, that you are a lesson in grace under pressure, that the devil was purged from your life, and God has claimed you again. You listen, but you wonder if God had claimed you, why did no one intervene? Why did they watch as you were torn apart? You begin to drift from faith, not because you disbelieve, but because belief no longer feels safe. The world becomes a place of caution. You walk with your head down. You speak only when spoken to. You keep your doors locked, even in daylight. And yet, there is a strange strength growing beneath the fear. Not defiance, not pride, something quieter. Survivors learn to notice things. You begin to see the looks others exchange, the way rumors grow in corners. You spot the pattern of suspicion before it fully takes shape, and you realize it could happen again, to someone else, maybe to a friend, maybe to a daughter, and that, more than anything, terrifies you, because now you know how it begins. You know the signs, not of witchcraft, but of accusation, of fear seeking a target. You know what it looks like when the town chooses someone to burn, and for the first time, you begin to wonder if you have a duty, not to fight, but to witness, to remember, to keep alive what was real, not what was said. You begin writing, quietly, not for a court, not for a church, but for the truth, in margins, on scraps of cloth, in the inside covers of books. You write down the faces, the dates, the whispers, the sequence of events, the contradictions, the lies. You write your name, and beneath it, the name you were given by the court. And in doing so, you draw a line between who you are and who they made you. You are not healed. You may never be, but you are not broken either. And that is a beginning. Seasons pass. The village continues its rhythms, planting, harvesting, gathering, praying. Children are born. Old men die. The church bell tolls the same as it always has. And you are still here. But you are no longer of this place in the same way. People no longer ask you to join the market circle. They no longer invite you to weddings or baptisms. Not because you are unwelcome, exactly, but because you are now the embodiment of a memory they wish to suppress. You are the story they tell their daughters when they want them to behave. Remember what happened to her. You are a caution. You are the shape of what fear can do. One day, a new preacher arrives. Younger, more charismatic. He smiles when he speaks. He talks about redemption, about new beginnings, about the power of faith to rebuild what has been broken. He visits you, intentionally, gently. He listens to your silence with respect. He offers you communion, and you decline. He asks if you have anything you want to confess, and you say nothing. He does not press. But as he leaves, you notice him glance over his shoulder, just briefly, as though checking to make sure the door closes behind him. Even the kind ones do not trust what they do not understand. You think often about those who did not survive, not just the ones who burned, but the ones who disappeared inside themselves long before the flames ever touched them, the ones who confessed too early or not at all, the ones who screamed too loudly and were forgotten too quickly. You remember their faces, their names, their hands. Sometimes you see them in your dreams, not in torment, but in peace, walking through woods unafraid, laughing by rivers you've never seen. You wake with tears, and you do not always know why. There is a guilt in surviving, not because you wish you had died, but because survival feels undeserved. You wonder why you were spared. Was it luck? Timing? Did they see something in you that could be molded, rewritten, made useful? Did you play the part well enough to escape final judgment? And what did that performance cost you? You begin to understand that the trial never really ended. It only moved inside. You carry it with you now, not as a wound, but as a second skin, invisible, but always present. Sometimes when young girls pass you in the road, they avert their eyes, not out of malice, but out of confusion. They have heard your name, but not your truth. They have heard the version whispered at dusk, not the one screamed in darkness. You wonder if one day you should tell them what it felt like, what it meant, what was lost, but not yet. You are still rebuilding, still reassembling yourself in fragments. The village has given you a place, but not peace. And so you build your own piece from the pieces left behind. A quiet garden, a patch of herbs, a window that faces the sunrise. You watch the light return each morning, and you remind yourself that though you were broken, you were not destroyed, and though your story was taken from you, you are writing a new one now, quietly, slowly, one word at a time. And yet, not all is stillness. There are moments, rare, fleeting, where laughter returns. A child runs by and smiles at you without fear. A stray cat curls itself around your legs, indifferent to your past. The first snow of winter falls in delicate patterns, and for just a heartbeat, the world feels new. You begin to take small steps beyond the margins of your solitude. You help a neighbor gather firewood. You whisper instructions to a young girl suffering from a fever, recommending the same herbs that once got you accused. You sit by the stream and hum songs your mother taught you, even if your voice cracks from disuse. You begin to feel time again, not just in the aching joints or the changing seasons, but in the slow return of rhythm. There is no music, no celebration, but there is breath and presence and a quiet continuation. You keep writing, not for anyone else now, but for yourself. You write because putting words to memory makes it real. It anchors the pain, the confusion, the moments of courage too easily forgotten. It becomes proof, not of innocence, but of existence. And sometimes in the evening, you read your own words aloud, not loudly, just enough for the walls to remember. You imagine others like you in other villages, women and men marked by silence. You wonder if they too keep journals beneath floorboards or etched in hidden pages. You begin to feel less alone. And then one day, a knock at your door. A stranger, young, uncertain. She has heard things, not from you, but from others. Stories, perhaps, not entirely accurate. She wants to know the truth, not for gossip, not for control, but for understanding. You invite her in. You pour water. You sit across from her in the soft light, and slowly, carefully, you begin to speak. Not everything, not all at once, but enough. Enough to turn fear into understanding. Enough to turn silence into strength. Enough to make the past something more than pain. And in that moment you realize you have survived not just the trial, but the aftermath. You have become what they feared most. Not a witch, but a woman who lived, who remembered, who endured, and who in quiet defiance told the truth anyway. And so you close your journal, set down your pen, and step outside into the cold dusk. The wind brushes your cheek, and the village behind you breathes as it always has, unchanged, unaware, but still alive. You walk forward, no longer hiding, no longer waiting. Whatever comes next, you will face it, not as the broken, but as the witness, and that is enough. Chapter 10. The memory that lingers, legacy and echoes. The fire is long gone. The crowds have scattered. The accusations have faded into the dust of older sermons and forgotten ledgers. The town square is silent now, save for the creaking carts and murmured prayers that mark the passing of another day. But something remains. Something intangible. A memory, not preserved in books or stone, but in the quiet hush that falls over conversation when a certain name is mentioned. In the wary glances cast toward the edge of the woods. In the lingering question in every child's mind, could it happen again? This is the legacy of the witch trials. Not just the records or confessions, not just the graves or the ruins, but the atmosphere they leave behind. An atmosphere of silence, of discomfort, of unspoken history. You feel it most when things are quiet, when the wind moves through the village with too much purpose, when the church bell rings and no one speaks, when a candle flickers too wildly in the dark. You live in a world built on stories, and these stories, the stories of accusation, of confession, of punishment, are not just echoes of a violent past. They are tools, lessons, warnings passed from one generation to the next. Not to protect, but to control. And the echo, once released, is not easily returned to silence. The trials were never truly about witchcraft. Not in the way the pamphlets claimed, not in the way the judges declared. They were about fear, about control, about the ease with which a community can turn on itself when given permission to point fingers. The rituals of accusation became part of the rhythm of life. A child falls ill, a neighbor looks too long at the wrong time, a harvest fails. It must be someone's fault. The machinery of blame needed only a spark, and once lit, it devoured indiscriminately. What remains today is not fire, but smoke, a haze over history that makes it hard to see the truth clearly. It's easy to imagine these events as distant, absurd, monstrous, but they were ordinary, committed by ordinary people. In towns like yours, with voices like yours, faces like yours. And so the real terror of the witch trials is not their brutality, it is their plausibility, the simplicity with which they unfolded, the softness of the first whisper, the nod of agreement, the casual, almost reluctant testimony, the shrug of a neighbor who does not want trouble, the silence of the crowd that watches but does not speak. It is this ordinariness that echoes, even now, in policies, in gossip, in the way justice can still be molded by those in power and accepted by those who dare not question. To remember the witch trials is not to fixate on the torture or the execution. It is to acknowledge how vulnerable truth is, how fragile compassion becomes in the presence of fear, and how easy it is for memory to become weaponized, sharpened into a lesson, a deterrent, a quiet suggestion to stay in line. Some say remembering is enough, but memory alone does not protect. Action does. Teaching does. Truth-telling does. You think of your own story, now written and hidden beneath floorboards or folded into prayer books. A story that might one day be found, or burned, or read aloud by someone brave enough to say your name without shame. Because the names matter. The names were always the first to go, replaced with titles, with accusations, with roles, witch, harlot, danger. You were called many things, but seldom your own name. That is how it begins, with the erasure of self. And so the remembering must begin with the restoration of names. You speak them aloud sometimes, in your garden, the names of those who were taken, those who confessed, those who vanished. You say their names like seeds, hoping some will take root. The earth, at least, listens. You wonder what future generations will say, if they will romanticize this time, turn it into tales of dark forests and brave heroines, or if they will sit in classrooms and read your trial transcript as a relic, if they will shake their heads and say, how strange, how cruel, how long ago. But it wasn't so long ago, and cruelty never really leaves. It only changes clothes. You've seen it in newer forms, in the way children are punished for speaking out, in the way women are doubted when they tell the truth, in the way entire groups are silenced because they threaten the comfort of the majority. The witch trial, you realize, was not a unique event, it was a symptom. And symptoms return, especially when the sickness remains unnamed. So you write, you keep writing, because someone must, because silence too is a kind of fire, one that spreads when no one speaks. And because your voice, once stolen, has returned to you, it trembles, it cracks, but it speaks. And that, in this world, is a form of magic. In time, the village will forget the specifics. They will forget the number of those accused, the names of the judges, the order of testimonies. Even the flames themselves will lose detail in retellings. But they will not forget the fear. It seeps into the soil. It grows into superstition. It is inherited, passed on in gestures and warnings, in the nervous glances between mothers and daughters, in the way some doors are always kept locked. You understand this now. The legacy is not about facts. It is about mood, about atmosphere, about the ways people change their behavior to avoid being noticed. It is about survival through silence. And you mourn that silence more than anything, because within it, so much truth was lost. So many stories never told, so many voices never heard, so many lives that could have meant more. If only they had been believed. You sit beneath an old tree in the woods, where it once began. You think of the girl who was accused first, her name lost, her life buried in shame. What did she feel in those final moments? Did she know what she had started? Did she realize her scream would echo through generations? You let the wind answer, and the wind is kind. You begin carving a small stone, a marker, not for anyone specific, but for all of them, a place to remember, a place to begin again. It is not a grave, it is a seed, and you water it with your breath, with your memory, with your refusal to forget. Years from now, someone else may find it. They may ask what happened here, and if they listen closely, they will hear not just pain, but defiance, not just grief, but truth. You smile, because even if no one else remembers, you do, and that is enough. Because legacy isn't just what others say about you after you're gone, it's what you say while you're still here. It's the courage to speak, even when no one listens, to tell the truth, even when it is dangerous, to love, even when it is forbidden, to remember, even when it hurts. You rise from the earth, brush dust from your dress, and walk back toward the village. The sun is setting. The world looks the same, but something is different now. You carry the past with dignity, not as a burden, but as a banner, a quiet declaration that you were here, that you survived, that you remembered, and that you chose to write it all down, not for fame, not for forgiveness, but for the future. Because even in darkness, memory can shine, and you are its keeper. Later you find yourself invited to speak, not formally, not from a pulpit or stage, but in small, hushed gatherings. A handful of women, young and old. They come to your home in the dusk, sit on wooden stools or the floor. They listen. They ask no questions. They do not interrupt. They simply listen, and you tell them. Not everything, but enough. You speak of the rhythm of suspicion, the danger of standing out, the long wait of being named. You speak of the trial, yes, but also of the years that came after, of learning to live again, to breathe without flinching. Sometimes they cry, sometimes they stay silent, sometimes they tell you their own stories. Different times, different wounds, but the same architecture of pain. And for the first time, you realize you are not only the one who remembers, you are one of many. Survivors, yes, but more than that, witnesses. The world outside does not change much. Men still preach, laws are still written, power still concentrates where it always has. But in these rooms, in these small fragile circles, something else grows, a different kind of power. The power of knowing, of seeing clearly, of recognizing the shape of injustice when it tries to disguise itself. You walk through the village and realize that the silence has changed. It no longer suffocates, it listens, and in that space between what was done to you and what you do now, there is a legacy taking root. One not built on fear, but on knowledge, not on shame, but on strength. And in that strength, there is a future, not free of pain, but full of possibility. You have turned the story, you have bent the ending. And though they once burned books and bodies to stop women like you from speaking, you speak anyway, and you are heard. One day a child asks you why you always light a candle at the same time each evening. You smile and pause before answering. You tell her it's for remembrance. You tell her that long ago people were punished not for what they did, but for who they were. That truth was not always valued. That silence once stood where courage now sits. She listens with the seriousness only children possess. And when she returns the next evening to light a second candle beside yours, you understand something profound. The memory no longer lives only in you. It has passed on, not as fear, but as awareness, not as weight, but as light. And you are no longer alone. The chapter of the trial has ended, but a new one has begun, written in smaller, quieter moments. In the hands that reach out instead of point, in the voices that speak rather than whisper. In the questions asked, not to condemn, but to understand. You once feared that history would swallow you, but now you see you have become a part of it. Not as a warning, but as a witness, and the echoes of your story will not fade. They will ripple outward, they will grow. And somewhere far from here, in a time not yet born, someone may speak your truth aloud, and the world may listen. And that is how healing begins. So tonight, you light one more candle. You place it not for mourning, but for the future, for the ones yet to be born, for the ones who may never know your name, but will walk more freely because of what you remembered, what you endured, and what you chose to share. That is your legacy. And that is enough. And as you close your eyes, resting after a long day, you feel a sense of stillness, not of silence, but of peace. The kind of peace that only comes when stories are no longer buried, when the truth is no longer feared, and when memory becomes a bridge instead of a wound. Tomorrow, the world will go on, unaware of the story you've carried. But tonight, with the candlelight dancing on your wall and the echoes of truth still humming in your breath, you know you have done enough. And that small knowing, at last, sets you free.